Hi, everybody.
All right, we're back.
We're back. And we're live streaming, Madam Clerk.
Yes, sir.
And we have a couple of guests who I'll introduce in just a minute, Sherry Moore and her dad, Mr. Julius Brown. But first, let me call to order this February 9th meeting of the City Council of Charleston. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilwoman Del Chapo. Councilmember Shealy.
Here.
Councilmember Safran.
Here.
Councilmember Mitchell. Councilmember
Here.
Brady.
Here.
Present.
Councilmember Gregory.
Here.
Councilmember Waring.
Here.
Councilmember Seekings.
Here.
Councilmember Shade.
Present.
Councilmember Griffin.
Here.
Councilmember Appel.
Here.
Councilwoman Jackson.
Here.
Mayor Tecklenburg.
Here. And now if y'all would like to join us, Councilmember Saccharin will lead us in an invocation.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm gonna depart from our traditional invocation in lieu of a poem about fear. This poem is from Khalil Gibran, who is a Lebanese-American painter, sculptor, and poet, and does share a lineage with Councilmember Shade and I. Given the anxiety-filled year we've experienced since March, I do think it's wise we have some words about fear, most appropriate right now. It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has traveled from the peaks of the mountains, the long winding road crossing forests and villages, and in front of her, she sees an ocean so vast that to enter, there seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there is no other way. The river cannot go back. Nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean because only then will fear disappear, because that's where the river will flow. And no, it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but becoming the ocean. That's it.
Wonderful.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Is it from
So, if you will see to my right, the American flag, and please join me in our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
allegiance
To the flag
of the United
United
United States of America
and
to the republic
for
which it stands,
one
nation
Under God,
under God,
indivisible,
visible,
With
liberty
and
justice
for all.
for all.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned, we have a couple of guests with us tonight. I received a letter not long ago from a Sherry Moore, whose father, Mr. Julius Brown, after being born in Charleston and having a great career in Florida and Missouri and elsewhere, came back home and is retired, now 85 years young. So I thought with Black History Month being this month that we would honor Mr. Brown and also another gentleman, Mr. Campbell, who I'll speak of in just a few moments. Mr. Brown became a renowned laboratory research technician. And if the last year of COVID and pandemic didn't teach us anything but the importance of our medical professionals and researchers, I don't know what did. So thank you for your service and your career. And it highlights the importance of a good STEAM education for our kids to pursue science and technology. Don't leave out the arts and math. And he was such a example, inspiration to his own daughter, Sherry. She currently works in the laboratory at Medical University of South Carolina. So Mr. Brown and his wife, Betty, they live on James Island and attend the First Baptist Church of James Island. Reverend Charlie Murray, who I think many of us know, is their pastor. So Mr. Brown and Sherry, thank you for being with us. I have this proclamation, which I think I've sent to you already, and mostly it highlights my introduction that I just gave. I'll just add a few other things. Whereas the city of Charleston wishes to recognize one of its most dedicated citizens, Julius Stephen Brown Sr., who was born on June 24th, 1935 in Charleston, South Carolina, and began his career in research in 1956 with a Dr. James Gavin at the Medical College of South Carolina. He became certified as the head research technician and then went on with Dr. Gavin to form at the University of Florida at Gainesville, again, was his head research technician. Then he moved in 1967 and took a position at the University of Missouri, where he worked with Sinclair Research Farm, doing research involving monkeys, over 1,000 monkeys. Over the years, Julius Stephen Brown Sr. has been recognized with several awards and honors for his work in research, such as Outstanding Animal Technician Award given by the American Association for Laboratory Animal Science. He was also recognized by the University of Missouri and the Columbia Tribune for his outstanding contributions to research. Whereas the city of Charleston would like to recognize you, Mr. Brown, for your years of dedicated service in the research field and for your exceptional contributions as an African-American research specialist. Now, therefore, I, John J. Tecklenburg, Mayor of the City of Charleston, we proclaim this day, Mr. Brown, in your honor to be Julius Stephen Brown Senior Day in the City of Charleston.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Sherry, would you or your dad, Mr. Brown, would y'all like to make a comment to council and the public?
I thank you very much, Mr. Falcon, Mayor Tecklenburg. I met you before you came to our church, First Baptist Church, on the corner of Dill and Camp Road, and you were playing the piano. And I greet you at the door. And thank you very much. And
God bless you, sir. Thank you for your years of service.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Now, my friends, another notable Charlestonian, unfortunately recently passed, Mr. James E. Campbell. He was a native Charlestonian, really a national and local treasure, an acclaimed educator, civil rights advocate, journalist, widely known and respected. Mr. Campbell passed away just recently, Saturday, January 30th. He resided also on James Island. The family will not be able to join us tonight, but I did want to share with you that I sent the family a resolution from myself and from City Council honoring Mr. Campbell. I bet that many of my colleagues here on council knew Mr. Campbell. It's remarkable. I'll just highlight a few of his accomplishments, and it's fascinating that he was born in Charleston back in 1925. He attended Immaculate Conception School right on Cumming Street and the Voorhees Normal and Industrial School in Denmark, South Carolina. In 1943, he joined the Marine Corps and served honorably in World War II. And after the war, he attended Morgan State College in Baltimore, but he was called back in and served also for 2 years in the Korean conflict. James Campbell, he returned to Morgan State. He graduated in 1953 with a major in English and minor in theater. And after graduating, formed the Arena Players. It's the longest continuously running Black theater company in the United States. And this is remarkable. In 1957, he relocated to New York City to teach and become involved in the civil rights movement. There he met Malcolm X, with whom he created the Organization of Afro-American Unity's Liberation School. He also taught in Tanzania for over 10 years before moving back to New York and then finally retiring back here in Charleston, where he remained active in local political and educational issues. He served as the state coordinator of South Carolina Project and advisory board member for the School of Education at the College of Charleston, chair of the Education Committee for the Charleston branch NAACP. And James Campbell rightly earned the respect, admiration, and high regard for all he came in contact with. And the city of Charleston has sustained a really great loss in his death. And I resolve from the mayor and from city council and all our citizens, our condolences to the family. But he was one fine Charlestonian. He always ran into me and always had a good word of advice for me, as I bet he did for many of you as well. Councilmember Shade.
Man, I just wanted to remind everybody that he graduated from Immaculate Conception School. And as many of us know, that was a segregated school for the Catholic Church for a number of years. And then the alumni from that school is very impressive. They have gone off, many of them, including Dr. Campbell, Mr. Campbell, obviously. But I just wanted to recognize that school. I know Councilman Warren is laughing because he knows what I'm talking about. And you know, the Immaculate Conception was closed, merged into other schools, and other schools closed. And we now have Charleston Catholic School. And of course, your children, my children that attended that wonderful school. So the legacy of that is continuing. But I just wanted to make a comment about the contribution that IC made to the Charleston community, to men and women like Mr. Campbell. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for recognizing both these gentlemen, Mr. Brown and his family, as well as Mr. Campbell and his family. I'm telling you, anybody who had the opportunity to meet Mr. Campbell, he was just memorable. Walking history, I can't tell you how interesting of a character he was. Recently, they had a birthday party for him. I think it was like, this is during COVID. So it was a drive-by birthday party. It was right on James Island. And I'm not kidding. It was a traffic jam to drive by this gentleman's house just to wave and wish happy birthday to him. I won't speak at length about this, but he was also a Muffet Point Marine, which was during the days of segregation, during the military, he served. And obviously they had a lot of trials and tribulations at that point, at that base. But he, this is during World War II. And that group stayed together. During his 95th or 96th birthday drive-by, the Muffet Point Marines and that group was still there to recognize Mr. Campbell and his accomplishment. That whole family, the Campbell, Seabrook family, just very well done. Obviously, the Brown family. So thank you for recognizing these families, in particular during during this month right here of recognition. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, we'll move right along with our agenda. Next up is our approval of city council minutes, but I see they were deferred. So that brings us right up to our citizens participation period. Madam Clerk, do you want to lead us through that?
Yes, sir. And we have 12 people signed up to speak tonight. Would you like to set a time limit?
2 minutes would be great with 12 people. Thank you.
Our first speaker is Brian Turner. And Mr. Turner, if you're on the line, if you could press *6. Brian Turner.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. My name is Brian Turner. I'm here representing the Preservation Society of Charleston. I'm the brand new Director of Advocacy, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you all as we do our good work in the city of Charleston. So I want to comment on the agenda item M1 related to the creation of a coastal flood risk committee tonight. So on behalf of the Preservation Society, we're urging the city to move quickly and decisively to identify and fund solutions to flooding and stormwater management. And we strongly encourage community-supported process to get this done. As funders of Wagner and Ball's perimeter protection analysis, joint funders, we've learned firsthand that data and direction are the key elements to succeed. And with this in mind, we offer the following 3 suggestions to improve upon the structure of the proposed new committee that would address coastal flood risk. First, the large size of the proposed committee could slow the process. We urge a more surgical approach to gain consensus around solutions and support a more rapid response to address immediate flooding issues. Second, the proposed composition is spin on technical experts that can inform the Army Corps' pending environmental analysis. Informed comments from the city will be crucial in the EIS process, especially making the case for broadening the Army Corps' proposed scope of work. Third, the city should remove fundraising from the committee scope and focus its primary initial efforts on technical review. We need a final plan with defensible solutions in order to convince prospective funders. To get there, the city should use this committee to realize a data-driven plan that will address all types of flooding, stormwater, and sea level rise issues. And thank you so much for the opportunity to comment tonight.
Thank you, Brian. Look forward to meeting you.
Next is Heather Bender. And if Heather, if you're on the line, if you could press *6. Heather Bender. Next is Jason Jones. And if you're on the line, if you could press *6, Jason Jones.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, sir.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jason Jones, founder of United Front of Charleston. Just over the weekend, we had the Stop the Hate rally down at the Battery. Both to double down on our message that we sent out at the last city council and to honor Muhyiddin Dabah, who was a great activist here in this area. With all that being said, today I did send another email to a majority of the members of the council with the demand point in there. Demand point number one was that the city no longer allows flags across the South to operate within their city. I have sent several documentation showing that this group is a hate group, hate language, threats on my lives as well as other lives of other Black leaders in the city. And this group has threatened to demolish statues that were put up in honor of Black figures, which is extremely exceptional, especially inside of Black History Month, all because they are afraid of statues coming down from Confederate figures across the Southeast. Second part of this is that we make sure that we make this area downtown a no protest zone. And then third, and this is the most important one of all, is that the city goes back and revisits the resolution put in. The resolution must be changed back to the original wording. We have groups here right now that mean to bring hate, malice, and discontent, that they all are white nationalists, neo-Nazis, or white supremacy groups. Those groups need to be spelled out. You will never have resolve until they are. And these are demands of the people. I yield back on time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next is Rita Kowalskis. If you could press *6 to unmute yourself. Rita Kowalskis.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening, Rita.
I want to talk to you all about some things. How many of you remember a few years ago watching the crowds gather outside the College of Charleston on the local news and seeing a young man run across the street and snatch a flagpole away from a member of a white supremacist group waving his hate flag? This was shortly after the terrorists murdered 9 innocent people at Mother Emanuel. How many of you watched the video of a grown man breaking a flagpole over young protesters back at the Battery this summer? Did you know that white men who support the show of white supremacy at the Battery have laid their hands on 50-year-old women at least 3 times in the past few months? You all know about the time the guy showed up with automatic weapons at the Battery? Or the times militias showed up there? Or when the guy was playing around with a long gun and aiming it across the park? How about the time the guy showed up with a grappling hook? Or the guy who stopped his car in the middle of the street and got out to threaten protesters? Do you have any clue how many cars stop in the street when the protests are going on? Before somebody gets hurt or worse, please do something. The areas at the Battery and White Point Gardens are high traffic areas with hundreds of people passing by every hour in buses, cars, bikes, horse-drawn carriages, and on foot. The purpose of the park is to be a place where everyone feels safe and welcome to explore and enjoy the area to its fullest. I'm requesting the areas of the Battery and White Point Gardens be designated a no protest zone. And until this can be implemented, I request that you immediately ban flagpoles from the areas at the Battery and White Point Gardens. It's dangerous and completely unnecessary, and there are much safer places, especially away from traffic, for groups to assemble for events when flagpoles are necessary. For example, Colonial Lake, Brittlebank Park, and Marion Square. And also, if there's any chance, I'm also requesting that somebody please get with the Charleston Police Department and request that the officers assigned to the Battery on weekends at least exit their vehicles. and stand nearer to existing protests, as their presence is a deterrent to white men thinking it's okay to lay their hands on me and my friends. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Theo Cogdill. And Theo, if you're on the line, if you could press *6 to unmute yourself.
Hey.
Hi, we can hear you.
Hi.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Theo Cogdill. I'm an activist involved in racial justice work and LGBTQ+ advocacy in Charleston. I have attended many protests since last June to speak out against racism, hatred, and white supremacy. The issue that I would like to call the council's attention to tonight is the group called Flags Across the South, led by Braxton Spivey, a man who is known to publicly espouse white supremacist ideals and who I've personally witnessed using derogatory language, not just about Black people, but directly to Black activists, hoping to cause a disturbance. I have seen members of Flags Across the South openly express racial hatred, twist the history of South Carolina and our nation to suit their white supremacist beliefs, and I've watched them ignore health and safety guidelines by refusing to wear face coverings in a public area during a global pandemic. I'm a social studies teacher. Clearly, I understand and support freedom of speech and freedom to assemble. What I don't understand is why the city continues to approve permits for this white supremacist hate group to hold their demonstrations. When I counter-protest them, many people walking by ask, "Are they for real? Does this happen a lot? Why is there a monument honoring the Confederate dead anyway?" Black children and Black young adults are the ones I have conversations with that are the most important. They're angry and hurt that people are in a public park demonstrating beliefs that should have died with the traitors who fought for the Confederacy. I urge the council to recognize Flags Across the South as a dangerous white supremacist hate group and no longer approve permits for demonstrations by this group or its members. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next is Rose Marie. And Rose, if you're on the line, if you could press *6. Rose Marie.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, good evening. Please proceed.
Hey, I just wanted to call in and echo basically my colleagues from the United Front of basically banning Flags Across the South from protesting or holding their rally at White Point Gardens. They have, once again, reiterating what everybody else has said, they have went out of their way to basically threaten Black leadership around Charleston and to take down Denmark Vesey. And this is all on like public forums like Facebook. Also banning them from assembly because they refuse to wear masks. There's a pandemic going on, and I really think that we should be, it's really counterintuitive to have a mask required sign right next to a statue where a bunch of people aren't wearing masks. Also, Harry Griffin, you have 36,000 people who want you to resign. I know you keep saying no, but 36,000 people are a lot of people. And let me tell you, there's like, what, 450 of them who actually reside in West Ashley. That's more people than that actually voted you in. So please resign, Harry.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next is Greta Anderson. And Greta, if you're on the line, if you could press *6. Greta Anderson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Greta Anderson. I'm one of those 50-year-old women that were assaulted by a member of Flags Across the South at a recent event. And I just want to encourage each of you to work together and stop this weekly display of hate that takes place at the Battery. You could start by asking the police department why they continue to issue these permits. This local hate group, Flags Across the South, should not be getting permits as they are guilty of assaulting counter-protesters, and they refuse to wear masks or social distance, spreading not only hate, but COVID as well. If you can't work that angle, perhaps you could try, like others have said, to make the park a no protest zone or simply ban flagpoles in public spaces. Mayor Tecklenburg, you and I have personally spoken regarding amending an ordinance to ban the size of the flag or the pole that one can carry. I'm sure you'll remember that.
Yes,
So I
ma'am.
encourage you again to all work together to make these things happen before someone is seriously injured. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next is Marcus McDonald. And Mr. McDonald, if you're on the line, if you could press *6. Marcus McDonald.
Marcus?
Hello, City Council. My name is Marcus McDonald, and I'm calling a representation of CHSBLM. I'm calling today to talk about Black History Month and current Black history and what it means to me and what's going on right now. So I read the last resolution that was changed, that was passed in the last 2 city council meetings about white supremacy. And I do want to reiterate one thing about the division. The division is already here. I know many of y'all have read the State of Racial Disparities report released by Avery Institute. The division is already here. The racial wealth gap is already here. The education wealth gap is already here. These groups do not seek to divide our community. They seek to remain the status quo. They're afraid of what is coming. The division is already here, and these groups seek, like the Flags of the South and Proud Boys, which have just been deemed a terrorist group by Canada, they seek to remain the status quo. And by doing nothing, you're actually helping their cause of remaining status quo. And before, I know I only have 2 minutes, so I'm gonna get to this. Harry Griffin, we demand that you resign immediately. As said before, there's over 36,000 signatures calling for a resignation. And if you want to take it to the polls, we can take it to the polls too. Like one of my former colleagues said before, we have almost as many signatures calling for resignation in your own district than you had votes in your last election. So I just urge you to resign immediately, or just ask for some help with your dad or something. You have to resign immediately because we can take it there, and we already have so much support from some people who helped you in your last election. So that's all I want to say. And it's bigger than you, Harry Griffin. Violent white supremacy is way bigger than you, but you are a big problem. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Next is Tracy Owens. And Tracy, if you're on the line, if you could press *6. Tracy Owens.
Good evening. I will be brief. I want to echo what a lot of my colleagues have said, but clearly it can't be said enough because there doesn't seem to be any action on these issues. My concern is flags across the South. They continue to get permits when they don't follow the rules outlined in those permits. They do not wear masks, ignoring the city's mask mandate, and this is an ongoing thing. They've never worn a mask. I've asked the police to what they were going to do about that, and the answer was, we're not the mask police. In July of 2020, a member of Flags Across the South broke a flagpole over a young man's back, violating ordinances on the parade permits and reservation permits. They clearly caused injury to persons and property, and they continue to do so. Yet, they continue to be granted permits. I'm unclear why we have ordinances if, in fact, they're not going to be enforced. I would like to suggest, if you're no longer going to adhere to the guidelines put forth in the permits, that you ban flagpoles from the Battery or declare the Battery a no protest zone. Also, since Harry Griffin has shown that he backs the very people that the hate resolution speaks to, he should resign immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next is Cashin Drolla. And Ms. Drolla, if you're on the line, if you could press *6. Cashin Drolla.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Cashin Drolla, Historic Charleston Foundation. Under bills for first reading, agenda item M1, I respectfully encourage council to give first reading to the ordinance creating City of Charleston's Peninsula Coastal Flood Risk Management Study Citizen and Business Advisory Committee. HCF commends Mayor Tecklenburg and Resiliency Officer Mark Wilbert for their work in bringing this forward. The city was wise to partner with this business and nonprofit community to pursue an independent analysis by Wagner and Ball on the Army Corps 3x3 study. Wagner and Ball made a series of recommendations on how to best navigate the Army Corps process and improve outcomes. Creation of this committee is commensurate with Wagner and Ball's recommendations. Communication, transparency, and community engagement are key for building stakeholder consensus, particularly given what's at risk and the potential for such a huge infrastructure investment. It's important that this committee's work begins now in advance of the release of the Army Corps Optimized Plan and the second public comment period. And I encourage council to move forward with this ordinance this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Cashin.
Next is Jimmy Walker. And Mr. Walker, if you're on the line, if you could press *6. Jimmy Walker.
Hi, this is Jimmy Walker. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm just here tonight for the second reading on the 578 Meeting Street project, and only here to answer any questions or concerns. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jimmy. Jennifer, you're on mute.
Sorry. Next is Pastor Dixon Thomas. If you're on the line, if you could press *6.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
Yes, forgive me if I'm a little labored in my breathing, but I want to make sure I get through this. We're faced with a clear and present danger such as we've never seen before in our generation. Unbridled and unrestrained hate that is fueled by white supremacy and empowered and emboldened by the most powerful voice in our nation and the world, the former president of the United States. These people are dangerous, they are strategic, they are homegrown terrorists, and they are right in our midst. They are everything they've said that Black Lives Matters is, a scenario that they developed and sold to the public to demonize the movement for Black lives while they were plotting the violent overthrow of our nation, our state, and even Charleston County. This was done, as it's always been done, under that banner of racial hatred in America, the Confederate flag. And it was done with the help of law enforcement officers, religious leaders, and yes, with the help of unscrupulous politicians who are friends with these miscreants, at least until they get exposed, knowing that it would almost take an act of God to remove them from office. That is why we strongly encourage you, one, to restore the original language of the resolution denouncing hate. These people do not operate in a gray area. They operate in a blood red area, as witnessed on January 6th at the Capitol in D.C. That is why we strongly encourage you to, two, ban all public flaggings of the Confederate flag within the boundaries of the city of Charleston. That banner represents hate, plain and simple, and has no place in a city that wants to be recognized for love and respect for all. And third, that is why we strongly encourage you to encourage your colleague, Harry Griffin, to voluntarily step down from his position on city council immediately, at least until the next election, because feigned contrition after getting caught is not redemptive. And elected officials who pander to white supremacists must know that there are consequences and repercussions for their actions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to go back and see if Heather Bender is on the line. Heather Bender, if you could press *6.
Heather? She must
All
not be with us.
We'll go on to our comments that we received by phone and email, and we submitted all of these comments to council prior to the meeting. One person said that they agreed with the Charleston Historical Society 100%. They didn't reference what they were agreeing with them in regards to, but they agreed with them. One person said the city should make a clear statement to condemn white supremacy, white nationalism, and neo-Nazism in the city of Charleston. 5 people asked that the city move forward with the formation of the City of Charleston Storm Surge Protection and Feasibility Advisory Committee. And they asked that the city give careful consideration to the selection of the committee members. A group of citizens and businesses working with the city and council will provide an important bridge to help engage and educate affected citizens on flooding issues. One person said to consider banning flagpoles at protests or make the Battery a protest-free zone. They said that a show on Netflix showed the cast members coming to Charleston and finding flaggers on the Battery. They said it was not a good look for the city, and they asked that Councilmember Griffin resign. One person asked that City Council consider a no mask, no permit policy for people to protest or gather in groups. One person said that flagpoles should be banned at the Battery and the Confederate flag should not be on large display because of its symbolism and use when the U.S. Capitol was stormed. Tony Woody stated that he is a site engineer and applicant in regards to L2 and is available to answer any questions. Ryan Foster said he was available to answer any questions as well. And those are all the comments that we received.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Appreciate that. So next we'll move along to our section on petitions and communications. First up is two appointments, Mr. Gregory Voigt and Nick Schumacher to the Charleston Housing Authority.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. I know that they look forward to serving and will work very hard. Next is a report from our Health and Wellness Advisory Committee by Councilmember Shade.
Thank you, Mayor Teckenberg. I appreciate that. I want to thank our wellness coordinator, Paul Wieters, for all the work that he puts in on this committee, getting the agendas together and organizing. He does a great job. And this group shows a lot of value. We've met a few times since the last time we gave a report. So Paul helped me put together some highlights on here of some of the things that we've done. And also want to thank Councilman Seekings for his contributions to this committee as well. He works hard on it and is a great asset for us. But first of all, I want to thank Tracy McKee and Dr. Katie Richardson. They continue to provide invaluable resources through monthly updates and understanding of specifics to what we can do and what we can expect from COVID in the weeks to come. This has been a welcome tool to all our members and an opportunity to get questions answered and to carry a help message away at each meeting. So what Tracy and Dr. Richardson do is great for us, great for our city council too. Part of our ongoing efforts are to help connect the partners in our community with a platform for sharing their opportunities. And we've had several excellent presentations from community partners sharing their resources and asking for support with getting information out to our community. One of those, Jennifer Roberts, who's a member of our committee with Charleston, Dorchester County Mental Health. She gives us updates on their services and the many partnerships throughout our community, especially within city government and with our public safety departments as well. An interesting note was that they have availability to always accommodate walk-ins Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at their Charleston County office over on Charlie Hall Boulevard. We've got the Healthy Tri-County and Trident United Way initiative. It's a multi-sector regional initiative to improve health outcomes in Berkeley, Charleston, and Dorchester counties, and was launched by Roper St. Francis, MUSC Health, and Trident United Way back in 2017. So the long-term aspirational goals of this initiative is to improve the health and well-being of every person in our community within the Tri-County area, especially where we see gaps that this pandemic has helped us identify, where we can live, learn, work, and pray together. We have connected them with our Committee on Equity, Inclusion, and Racial Conciliation, specifically with the Health Disparities and Environmental Injustice Subcommittee, to join that team and to assist with health disparities. The important note here is that this group is a valuable tool to our community to be at the table with us as a listening tool and supporting pillar and bridging partnerships to work alongside us in health and wellness. SC Hopes and opioid overdose. We've seen increases in this lately. There's 3 opioid hotspots in South Carolina, in Greenville, Charleston, and Horry counties. And if you want to see a list of those, DHEC posts their information at a site called justpainkillers.com. But recently we've seen the highest rates in the state of South Carolina's history, really, for more overdoses. And so it's a very, very important concern for us. But South Carolina does have a hotline. It's 1-844-SC-HOPES for people with opioid overdoses and other mental health problems that they're experiencing. And it serves as a resource to not only listen, but more importantly, to help tailor a response and connect the resources to, or connect to resources nearest to that person. So there's also the Roper St. Francis Hospital Take Back program. Their goal, of course, is to remove household opioids and other prescription medicines for the prevention of overdose and protection of our environment. And we also, on our Charleston City website, we have a list of take back areas, which also includes our CPD headquarters, of course. So we heard this week from Garcia Williams about Red Dress Sunday, and they're inviting all faith-based groups to join in the celebration of Red Dress Sunday, which brings awareness to heart disease being the #1 cause of death among women. And for more information on that, you can go to the MEDI, THEMEDI.org. Also want to give a special thank you to Anton Gunn. He had chaired us for the last 3 years on this committee, and he's resigned from MUSC and moving on with his career in the private sector, but he's been great for our committee. And we're going to miss having him there. So the committee does have one recommendation, and that is that the city council provide advocacy, which includes voicing support, participating as a volunteer or encouraging volunteers to support to a one-day data collection campaign called the Heat Watch, which is a community science urban heat island mapping campaign in 2021, and advocating for the inclusion of extreme heat risks in planning and investment strategies in order to draw down this significant health risk to Charlestonians. There is a potential grant that was submitted and approved pending funding allocation from NOAA by a cohort of the Medical University of South Carolina, the Citadel, the Charleston Medical District, and Charleston Resilience Network to better understand Charleston's varying heat exposures and its differing communities, and to link ongoing work on public health, which includes the city's commitment to health in all policies, heat stress, coping capacity and resources, health comorbidities such as chronic respiratory and cardiovascular conditions, and correlated risk areas such as air quality and inequity. To this end, the applicant team asked for our city's support. Council is not being asked to commit any financial means, just advocacy and participating support as volunteers, or encouraging community members to volunteer their support with the Heat Watch later this summer. There'll be more to come on this in the future, and Mark Wilbert is our city liaison in these discussions. So, and in the coming months, we're going to continue to look at how we can impact the life expectancy of our community through health in all policies. So sorry that was lengthy, and but I appreciate you allowing us to give our committee report to council. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Shealy, and I wanted you to give that report because of all the good work I witness when I attend those meetings. Y'all have really got a lot of great things going. Councilmember Shade, and then Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Shealy. Thank you for the work that you're doing on this committee, and the comments you made about the overdose on the opioid abuse. There's, I think, part of that map that you were referring to, or that website. I think you can go by zip code and even by neighborhoods to find out the folks who have experienced an overdose, some of them fatal, and you would be shocked to see what's in your backyard, literally, as a number of overdoses in our community. It's still a crisis. It's still a huge problem in our community, and whatever we can do to partner with those other agencies, I think is critically important to that. And again, just another shout out for the fine work that you're doing on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. I think you all know all our police and fire are equipped with Narcan in order to administer in the event of a drug overdose. I get weekly reports from our fire department. They administer that drug every week to someone in our city and save lives. It's amazing. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Councilmember Shealy. This was a very thorough and well-executed report, and it demonstrates to me why I would never sit on the Health and Wellness Committee, because I don't remember medical terms to save my life. So, so thank you for that kind of work. I did want to say, I would love to volunteer for the heat watch and all the things that you're going to get into as far as advocacy. I'm impressed that the Charleston Resilience Network has been studying, it's the carbon aspects of heat. And basically they're convinced with the science that's been provided to them, that as much as we fear water and all the impacts of flooding to our region, that over a much bigger threat to everyone's health and safety is heat and the buildup that not capturing carbon is giving to us. So sign me up for whatever advocacy your group is going to be building.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shealy, would you like a motion for our support of the effort that you mentioned on the heat study?
Can I recognize Councilman Seekins? He had his hand up. Is that okay?
Sure. Councilmember Seekins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two things. I just want to commend and thank Councilmember Shealy. He has been a very dutiful and faithful member of the committee, which I also have sat on since day one. I've missed a few, but he's been there all the time. And one of the things that I have learned, and we've learned a lot, it's been a very interesting committee to sit on, and lots of people from this community who are committed to health and wellness. One of the things that we've learned, and we learn it week in and week out, and it becomes more pronounced every time we talk about it, is that we have a major health and access to healthcare disparity problem and issue, not just in the city, but in this region. And it is, to me, at a level that is somewhat alarming. And I know we are just one little old city, but I believe that it is time for us to put some resources towards that and do whatever we can to work on those disparities. They are so dramatic, literally, not just by zip code, but by address in any given subdivision or any given community. Those disparities are traceable, and we've got to address that. I mean, we're tonight going to take up putting 17 people on a committee to think about a wall. We ought to also be thinking about putting people together, not just to talk about those disparities, but Mr. Mayor and fellow council members, to actually do something about them. And I think really during the time of COVID, it's become even more pronounced. So the work of the committee has been to shed a light on that. I think now we need to take a step forward and step up and do whatever we can. And I know there's many good works going on in this community, but to really focus on it and to get a report back regularly about what we're doing about healthcare and healthcare access disparities. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, fellow members of council.
Thank you. Mr. Shealy, anything further?
No, sir. You go ahead with what you were saying.
Do you want to, you mentioned that the committee wanted our support for the grant that they were applying for?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. If I could.
Second.
We have a motion to approve that, and it was a good effort as you described. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Shealy. So speaking of health and wellness, next up is a brief report on our ongoing response to COVID-19. We're getting out of this. We're getting vaccinated. Shannon, Tracy McKee is up first, I think.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor. Thank you. Tonight will be another tag team effort between Shannon and myself. I'll provide a really brief update on COVID and then turn it over to Shannon so we can talk about really the incredible work that our emergency management team has been doing and get you all updated on that. So where are we with COVID? We continue to go down in the number of cases. So over the last 7 days, we've seen a 22% decrease in the 7-day average, which is great, and 13% down from the previous week. So that's, we're moving in the right direction. Our total number of cases per capita are still a little high, but we're starting to see some, we've got a couple of indicators now that are green and a couple in yellow. So this is good news. We still have a little ways to go to be talking about moving to a new phase, but we are headed in the right direction. Hospitalizations, these numbers are still a little high, but they do seem to be very stable over the last few weeks. So they don't seem to be going up, which is, they seem to be going a little bit up and down, but seem to be very stable overall. And part of this dashboard, if you haven't been there, you can actually change the county here. So if you're curious to see how our hospitalizations in Charleston County look compared to other counties from around the state, or want to take a look at Berkeley or Dorchester County, those are in there as well. So with that, I wanted to point out there is a new page on the dashboard. Also, you can change that by county, and it just looks at the kind of number of cases as well as the deaths by county. So that information is now available on the dashboard. Switching over to vaccines, as you can see, we've seen kind of a steady increase in the distribution of Moderna. The Pfizer is kind of staying at the same level, but we're getting close to, I think next week we'll see about almost 80,000 doses of Moderna and Pfizer coming into the state. So hopefully that continues to ramp up. What does that mean in terms of getting our state vaccinated? As far as first doses distributed, we've currently, or as of the distribution next week, we'll have enough first doses for 12% of the population of South Carolina coming into the state. And about 70% of those first doses have actually been administered. So we're really improving there. And if you haven't seen this map, this is updated daily by DHEC, but it shows all the locations that are actively taking vaccine appointments. So this is a really handy map to have. I think it's the Vax Locator is the name of the website from DHEC. And like I said, this is updated daily, and you can see exactly where you can go to get a vaccine when it's your turn. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon to talk about the great work that emergency management is doing.
Thank you, Tracy. Appreciate the kind words. The bottom line, we're trying to add to that map there that you just saw that Tracy showed you. We've got a number of efforts that are happening. I think I said in the last meeting, it's a lot like we're the team is like racehorses in the gate waiting for it to drop. We've got all these logistical elements that we've been working to solidify, and the chance that we're able to see some increased numbers of availability of vaccines. Well, there's indications that that's happening now, which is great news. Currently, we're in discussions with MUSC on using the old DMV as a location. Would work out really well for us. 180 Lockwood, still working through a lot of elements with that to bring the room up to speed, but more to follow there. We've also got an effort with Harris Teeter, DHEC, and the Gaillard Center to roll out a vaccine effort next week. Be a 3-day event, open 5 or 6 hours for each one of those days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, by appointment. Looking at 700 people per day cycled through that location, which is pretty exciting. We also have we're in discussions with Federal Healthcare, just as we were when we started looking into testing way back when, seems like eons ago, but to provide possible use of the Arthur Christopher Recreational Facility in mid-March for yet another vaccine effort. We've held multiple employee focus groups to gauge receptivity to receiving a vaccine, any obstacles that employees may face in receiving one. So in terms of like they're being able to travel or, work schedules and that sort of thing, we're digging in on that as well. So a lot of different areas that we're focusing on. We will continue to have this team assembled through the spring and summer, and really as long as it takes to make sure that we get to herd immunity. So pending your questions, that's all I have for you tonight.
Councilmember Gregory.
Yes, I sort of like to loop it all back to the previous discussion with, and Kevin talked about connecting with the commission and its subcommittee on disparities. And I think I heard Councilman Seeking said, we need to stop talking about it and we really need to do something about it. And I totally agree with you. And I think that through our subcommittee, we may be able to get some traction and some action. But my question has to do with race. Okay, are we collecting data on race? As Sakrin and I head the commission on equity, inclusion, and racial conciliation, I mean, it is clear nationally that there are inequities, and there are some states that are not even taking data, so we really don't know. So my question is, does the state of South Carolina collect racial data so that we can identify disparities? And going back to what Mike and Kevin were talking about, being able to locate, especially if you can do it by zip code, and sometimes we can by zip code, make some determination with regard to equity. So my question is, first, are we collecting racial data? And if so, can our future reports reflect that to determine whether or not there are, in fact, inequities, and what are we doing about it?
Councilmember, thank you for your question, sir. There's been a lot of emails that have gone back and forth that I've read from Bloomberg and others forwarded to me by the mayor. I know there's a lot of interest in that. Personally, I have not seen anything yet in terms of numbers that would paint a picture for us. Tracy, you're kind of our data expert. Have you seen anything from your side?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know the answer to that at this moment. We have been looking at the data that DHEC has been releasing. They are only releasing numbers of doses that have been administered, where, and the locations at which they've been administered. But that's certainly something that we can reach out to DHEC and to see, number one, are they collecting it? And at what point will they be able to give us that information? Because we're past the point of probably being able to identify anyone, which is usually the concern. So hopefully we can start getting that information, at least at an aggregate level, to be able to report that. So we'll look into that.
We can't require that information locally. We can't take the data that we have, let's say for Charleston County, and be able to get some kinds of indicators. Because for me, this is sort of an emergency. I mean, people are dying. I actually know a number of elderly African-American people who are confused. They have no idea where to go, how to get the vaccine. There are public housing communities, okay, where we have a large number of an elderly population. So my concern, I'm really, really concerned about this. And I think that we've been talking about this for a while. Okay, this isn't the first time that we brought up the need for this kind of data and for us to be able to track it. And in addition, at what point are we going to go to those areas, okay, where we know that there's a concentration of the elderly? And this is not just something that is happening to the elderly, by the way. I mean, you can track some of this just based on income as well. So it's kind of across the board. And I just don't want to just continue to talk about it and say we're going to look into it and nothing really happens. And as a result, people continue to die because they don't have access.
Councilmember Jackson is next, but if I may, Councilmember Jackson, that's why Shannon and the staff are working so hard with the healthcare providers to provide additional places where the vaccine can be distributed. And the limiting factor has been the doses are just not here yet. But as soon as they're here, we're offering city facilities, our gym, our former DMV center, to MUSC, to Fetter, CARTA. We are throwing ourselves in front of the bus and trying to make vaccinations easier in Charleston to every citizen. And we're going to make every effort to do that. We are making every effort to do that. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I really appreciate and I totally align myself with Councilmember Gregory's, pent-up demand that if we're not being given information that points us to the racial disparities and the work that needs to be done to correct that, then I think it is time to be assertive, aggressive, whatever it takes. And my comment is actually based on the lack of supply. So Mayor, you just pointed to that because my experience personally with friends and constituents this past week was a big example. MUSC has been doing an amazing job, I think, of managing their appointments, getting the vaccine out, immediately. They are as helpful as possible to their customers. You don't have to be a patient already enrolled at MUSC. All you got to do is create a little email account for yourself in order to sign up for a vaccine. I mean, they have done an amazing job, and it's very friendly. And if you can't do the internet part, you can call. You have to stay on the line for some minutes, but a very helpful customer service rep comes on and makes an appointment for you. So I think that we should all, just congratulate our ongoing partnership with MUSC. But what happened this week, I think, is the big concern that people who had appointments for either their first and or their second vaccine early this week that we're in right now were canceled and put back to Saturday. And then they don't even know if their appointment that they already had in the pipeline for number 2 vaccine is going to be honored. So, and that really rests with the state delivery. The state delivery supply, has just dried up. So I have friends who are driving to Columbia because Prisma is probably the best supplied vaccinating agency in the state. But we've got to just stay on that too. I don't know what's happening with the state supply, but we've got to have more to deliver. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Saccharin.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to take this opportunity to really just kind of talk a little bit about the commission and the work that we're doing and support my co-chair, Mr. Dudley, on this. Just an example of, I realize that health disparities, could be something that we think about from a state or national level. But one example, as the vaccine is distributed here locally, if folks don't have access from a transportation standpoint, that's a barrier. If folks don't have access from a time standpoint, meaning if the healthcare facility closes at 5 or 6, how are folks supposed to get there? So those are 2 levers that we could touch on here locally that would help with access, and it would cost us very little to do. I do want to say, though, as the commission announces some of the recommendations, I just want to say I support Councilman Seeking's notion that we need to fund and find these resources, because at the end of the day, we fund what we value. And that really has to make sense for us. So there's going to be some recommendations that come down that might not be popular, and there's going to be some recommendations that are going to require some funding. And I'm just letting everyone know that if we are serious about creating a situation where we reduce the disparities around health, around education, around economic opportunity, we have to have a real discussion around funding and resources. So thank you.
Understood.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor?
Anyway, now before I go back to Councilmember Gregory.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. I mean, just so that we could, there are other parts of the country who are not even using the computers or anything. First come, first serve, okay? Line them up, especially in those communities where access is a problem, okay? I just want us, mayor and council, okay? And I'm gonna say it, okay? We have to avoid vaccine genocide. Let's call it what it is. And I'm not saying it's intentional either, but I'm just saying in terms of the rate of death in certain communities, okay, is clearly genocide. And I think that anything that we could do, okay, and without having to go to a computer or make a telephone call, and I think I said this the last time, we really got to go where the people are. I mean, people who don't have cars, people who don't have computers, exactly what Councilman Saccharin said. And I think we've got to do something. And if we don't, I think that we're just as liable as a city.
Council member, so I wanted to add this real quick. That's a great point. And one was made earlier about, staggering maybe hours someone's working and then they just don't have an opportunity because it's not available to them. So we're going to stagger next week the Gaillard Center hours, 5-6 hours one day, and then shift it to the evening the next day. And then to your point, let me say this, the Recreation Department is partnering with MUSC to provide assistance to individuals who want to make an appointment but lack computer access. Citizens will be able to walk into a participating recreation facility and ask for assistance in making an appointment. The 7 recreational facilities were carefully chosen because of their proximity to public housing and would allow for social distancing and safe use of computers and internet. So the IMT is working, Ms. Lori Yarborough and others really kind of helping us. We're all seeing that there's a need here and we're all in complete agreement with you that there needs to be a focus on this. And Councilmember Jackson, to your point, leveraging some intrusive leadership to see if we can't get some answers to some of the questions that we have. It's a lot like it was when we started this testing stuff months ago. I know that we'll be off to the races at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later, but just know that your incident management team is working very hard to get this for you. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Shannon. Councilmember Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with everything that was said. I appreciate Councilman Shade leading it off and the follow up by Councilman Seekings and Saccharin and certainly Gregory all around. I 100% agree with you all. And if this COVID package out of Washington, D.C. emerges, like the way it's talked about, there will be some funding and we got to keep our mind on the ball as we're talking about now when we don't have funding, when we get it, not to get amnesia. Now, that said, I still think there's an opportunity. I commend the mayor for his leadership on COVID during times with the emergency ordinances that it wasn't always popular, but I still think this city led in trying to do best practices when it came to COVID protection for our citizens. But now we're getting the vaccine and we can lead by the 13 people on this screen because we got some young people on here that may not get their vaccine until the next century. But anyway, has anybody out of the mayor and 13 and 12 council members, has anybody received their shot? By show of hands. Okay, 3. I have my shot. My wife and I are going to be scheduled for Friday. I think it would be great when we can get to the point of having hopefully 100% of a council. Should you decide to take the shot, take it. By the same token, Mr. Mayor, I think our city should lead from the standpoint of our 1,700 plus employees. As they get vaccinated, maybe we can have a temperature gauge to say, a third has been vaccinated, 50% of our employees have been vaccinated, and keep up with the demographics of that. it's been said nationally that 47% of African Americans have said they will not take or having trepidations about taking the vaccine. Now, in my sphere of influence in the neighborhoods, church groups, and even this council, I have not come across 47% of the African Americans saying they're not taking those shots. So I don't know where that is, but it's not in the people that I come across, but I know there's some trepidations out there. So small, medium, large, when we can lead by examples and show that we rolled up our sleeves and got the shot, let's let people know. It'd be great to have a high percentage of our employees. I don't know that we get 100%, but certainly a high percentage of city employees that hopefully would lead the state to say that Charleston, that city is being vaccinated by its leadership and its employees. So I don't know whether we're keeping up with that, but if we are, we ought to let the numbers be known. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Appel. And then Shade.
Yeah, I think Councilmember Waring stole a little bit of my thunder when I was going to talk about. Guys, I said maybe, gosh, 8 months ago, sometime around the summer, if you thought the anti-mask people were something, wait till the anti-vax people came out. Because I want to just drop a truth bomb on everybody right now. There's still a lot that has to happen in this culture for the idea of vaccination to take hold the way it needs to for the numbers to get to where they are. I'm on 538.com right now. I wanted to pull up what the polling results are and what the and this is a bipartisan, from the left, from the right. 42% of African Americans said they're comfortable taking the vaccine. That's 83% of Asians, 63% Hispanics, 61% white. I've got folks in my family that work at Roper and MUSC, and they tell me that healthcare professionals on the front lines are turning down the vaccine for various reasons. So, you want to talk about healthcare disparities in the United States, that's a very broad, complex conversation that can go on for a long time. There's a lot of work that has to happen at the federal and state level. There's a lot of criticism that could be laid about how this country's handled the COVID-19 and the vaccine rollout. There's been a lot of amazing success stories, but also some really inexcusable failures. But there's not, the city of Charleston, with our limited resources, we can't solve all these problems, but we can do what we can do. I think that the idea of making some of our facilities available for mass, vaccination events and things of that nature is awesome, to the extent we can help people get to and from and use some of our resources to help get people connected. But guys, there's a cultural, philosophical thing that has to be addressed here. And each of us in our own circles need to help get the word out that, vaccines don't have, Bill Gates, microchips in them and all that craziness that you see on social media. I mean, it's easy for us to laugh at that. I think everybody on this screen will take the vaccine as soon as it becomes available to them. But, we as in our small roles as elected officials need to set an example, because what I'm scared about is that even if we had all the vaccines and we had, everything geared up and ready to roll, which we don't and may not have for a while, although I think that there's some positive trends in that direction. I don't know if the public would even accept it right now, even if it was available. And I don't know, that's probably a very complex, cause for some of this skepticism. I mean, there's a 15% gender gap. And if you can believe it, more men are willing to take it than women, according to these polls, which I'm shocked. I would have thought the women would have been above the men in this one. But that's another issue that we need to address. And again, I don't think we can solve all the problems, but where we can help and set a good example, as Councilman Waring just mentioned, I think we ought to be doing it.
Thank you. Councilmember Shade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And sorry if I sound like I'm jumping on the bandwagon. I just want to say I appreciate this very healthy discussion that we're having. Councilman Waring, I am scheduled for my shot. I'm trying to move it up a little bit earlier, but I am scheduled for it. But I think that we've been dealing with this almost a year now. We're coming close to our 1-year anniversary when we suspended in-person council meetings and went to this setup. And it's an opportunity for us to look back on what Councilmember Gregory has been talking about. This pandemic has revealed a huge disparity in our community. And it's the number of folks who have been exposed and have been diagnosed with this COVID-19 virus. It's the number of school children who don't have access to the appropriate tools, electronic tools to study remotely, or have the support system at home that they need to study and get their education that their other peers are receiving. It is all over the board. I mean, it is from top to bottom, the high level of disparity in our community of how this pandemic has impacted us. And we've got to do, and I steal this from Councilman Warren, we've got to do better as a community to address this from every aspect of it. And we're just not doing it. On CBS this morning, there was a presentation of Walgreens and Uber in Chicago partnering together to get folks to those sites. And that's what we need to do here in Charleston. Something along those lines to make sure that the private sector partners with the public sector to make sure that we're reaching out to those who need assistance to getting to those testing sites and to getting to those sites to get their shots, the first and second shots. I know we're doing a lot. I know that there's more that we can do, but I really do appreciate working with everybody on addressing the disparity that Councilmember Gregory and Sacramento have been bringing up. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, if no other comments, I think Shannon and Tracy, thank you for your updates. Keep up the good work. As you hear, there's much more to do. So next is our council communications section. We have first item up is for permission for council members to participate in city council meetings from their desk in council chamber. Councilmember Griffin.
Yes, sir. I just would like an opportunity to do the work of the people and the place of the people at a subsequent meeting in the chamber at my desk. Didn't know that I would need to get everybody else's permission, but happy to do so. So that's why we got it on here tonight. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And I'll say, Councilmember Griffin, that's perfectly fine with me. But it was just a technicality that apparently in our emergency ordinance we passed by council, we set up the way we meet. So if it's a consensus of council, I think it's fine, but I just felt like given that technicality that we should ask council if that's okay. Any objections from council for any one of y'all to Zoom into the meeting from council chambers? I mean, I'm here in City Hall every time we have council meetings, so the building's open and all like that. Councilmember Sacrin.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say, I think it's a great idea. Thanks, Councilman Griffin. What do you need to do to let folks know that we're coming in? Just contact Jennifer?
If you'd contact Jennifer, that would be adequate. The only thing I would point out that if more than one person is in the room, though, according to our city guidelines policy, we would ask you to wear a mask.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Shade.
So, Mr. Mayor, if we go there, the public is not allowed inside the council chambers. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And will we have to have a security officer present in the council chambers?
No, sir. We have one in the building. The doors are actually secured after 5 anyway. But we have security in the building until the evening, until we vacate the building at the end of the meeting. He stays until I leave, and the clerk. Madam Clerk?
I just wanted to say, and this probably might be something more for Tracy and Shannon, but if we had more than one person in there, we would have to make sure that everyone would be spaced apart. So if we have 2 council members that typically, sitting next to each other at a meeting, we might have to look at a different seating arrangement just to make sure we've got the proper distancing.
Correct. I think Rick has looked at the chambers, and it's rated for 11 people to be in the whole chambers at one time. But we'd ask everybody, if anybody came, to spread out and to wear a mask. Tracy, am I missing anything? Okay. All right, well, hearing no objections, that'll be fine. Just let Madam Clerk know. Councilmember Waring, did you
Yeah,
want?
I was just thinking it's a wonderful testimony to our flexibility as a city. You can be there on Zoom. We can be in our respective places on Zoom and in the halls as well. So I appreciate this flexibility. So I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea. Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right. So the next item up is also from Councilmember Griffin, a request to consider agenda item L16 currently deferred. Councilmember Griffin.
I think legal should probably discuss this because I really don't know exactly why this route needs to be taken, but I'm happy to hear from our legal staff as to why.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Councilmember Griffin, we put this initially on council communications so that we could discuss with not just you, but with the entire council about what we felt was the correct procedural move. We certainly think that this motion, well, let me step back. The matter was deferred by a motion of council. And so in order to undefer it, so to speak, we would need a motion to withdraw the deferral, or as it's known under Robert's rules, to take it from the table. And that motion certainly can be made tonight. And the only issue we had procedurally was that matter was listed on the agenda as deferred. And so what we would ask is so that there can be public participation and adequate notice to the other council members as well as the public, that if we are going to, if there is a motion to remove it from the table and that is approved, that the matter then appear on the next agenda for the substantive discussion so that people have an opportunity to be notified that this is going to be discussed and that council also has an opportunity. Now, the only other procedural option would be in order, if you were interested in, if council was interested in discussing the substance of this matter tonight, okay, it's not on the agenda. So there would have to be a finding by 2/3 of the council to, once the motion to remove it, to take it from the table is approved, you would then need to get a second motion by 2/3 vote to add it to the agenda. And then basically, I think it's on there for second reading. Is that correct? Second or third reading. You would need to find, you need to have a finding of imminent or emergency rationale for considering the matter. So the motion can be made tonight. There's no question about it. We just listed it here to sort of discuss the procedural aspects of it to make sure that it was procedurally following the correct process. And again, the main point here is a motion needs to be made to withdraw it from the table, which is in effect a motion to withdraw the deferral. But then under FOIA, we should schedule it for the next meeting so that it appears on the agenda as a matter that is going to be considered. Public has an opportunity to be heard and council can also have adequate notice of it.
Thank you. Councilmember Waring. You're on mute.
Thank you. Since this is a drainage issue and it's always been before council, I'm wondering whether we dropped the ball, and I'll take responsibility for that. Was this supposed to come back before the Public Works Committee? Because if we deferred it for some reason. I mean, to maybe alter it, adjust it in some way. If I remember correctly, I think this dealt with low-lying properties. I don't know, something maybe around 6-foot elevation or something like that, very low-lying properties. And it was discussed in the context of the Dutch dialogue in that regard. I'm thinking, why wouldn't this, I think we should pull this back to Public Works and then vet through whatever, we can go back and review the tapes in the minutes, why council deferred this. I don't really remember right now, but I knew it was a drainage issue. I knew it was low-lying properties. And I know it was in the context of the Dutch dialogue. So I would think instead of, why not send it back to the Public Works Committee and work through that, the main reasons we deferred it.
Well, I think that's an excellent suggestion. I would like to call Councilmember Jackson, if you'll allow me to call on Matt Fountain next. I think he could share a little history about this and what he was thinking in addressing this issue going forward. Matt?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I would probably want to go back and review the tapes for incredible specificity, but I believe the original deferral was when we were considering the updates to the stormwater manual, and that there was a discussion that many of the impacts of fill on flooding situations would be handled within the stormwater manual. So there was a consideration to put kind of the fill and build ordinance, as it was called at the time, on deferral while we addressed the stormwater manual to see if that basically resolved the issues that were raised in the fill and build. And I think it was left on deferral because council had originally asked for, after we did pass the stormwater manual, for the stormwater department to come back in early 2021, kind of reconvene the stakeholder task force that we had for the stormwater manual, gather some information from those task force members on how the new manual was working, and then kind of come back through Public Works Utilities to discuss if any amendments were needed to the manual. I think that's kind of where we left everything. So Councilman Waring may be right that we kind of may be on a trajectory to take it back through the Public Works Utilities Committee as part of that discussion on the manual, and then see if there still is a reason to further discussion on the fill and build ordinance that isn't covered by that stormwater manual.
Great. Councilmember Shade, did you have your hand up or not? Jackson did, and then back to Griffin. Councilmember Jackson.
And yeah, a lot of what I was just about to say in answer to Councilmember Waring's question about, why did we defer it and all of that? That's my memory as well, that because the manual was about to be delivered and adopted or, considered seriously, that council members who were serving on that committee were pretty, I think, pretty definite that a lot of the concerns that were expressed in representing in an ordinance what we've been learning from the Dutch dialogue study, that we would see those things handled by the 2020 stormwater manual. I personally would love to get that review underway. I have my, I don't want it to bog down in trying to get this task force together. I know that there are some things that maybe you would need to consult with them for, Mr. Fountain. But the other missing item that has been, identified and truly is a missing link to how we were planning on using the manual and enforcing it in the most worrisome locations that are, under sea level, and all the locations that we learned about during Dutch dialogues. We're supposed to be creating what the manual called special protection areas. And I know that Mr. Fountain and his department and AECOM under their program contract have been studying all of those locations and are pretty much ready to identify them to us. And I would put forward that might be even a more important update to happen to the manual. So I'm on the bandwagon of let's look at the manual. Let's not take a lot of time. I think there are some missing pieces that now we know enough to add back in. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Agreed. Councilmember Griffin.
Yes, sir. I'd like to make a motion that we withdraw this item off of the agenda because I was hoping that we could take this item up, as I was the one who brought it up in the beginning. I've never heard of an item deferred for a year and a half, waiting on some sort of movement and not getting it. The fact of the matter is, as council members, we have a right to bring legislation to this body and vote on it. And it just seems to me like there's been so many hoops. I mean, what does it hurt to vote? And if council agrees with it, then we pass it. And if they don't, we don't. You know, I think that this is setting a really bad precedent here. We defer items all the time. We could go back and find items that we've deferred over the last few years that have never had to come back up and get council's approval to bring back to the agenda. The fact of the matter is this item was deferred because staff felt that it should be labeled as deferred on the agenda. I mean, we could have taken this motion, we could have not labeled the item as deferred on the agenda, taken a vote as to whether or not we wanted to take the item up, and we could have voted on it tonight. I've never heard of a council member bring something forward and be told, we'll have to vote on whether or not council wants to go for it, and then maybe you can bring it up in 2 weeks. You know, that's just not good governance. I'm really disappointed that that's the path we're taking, but I'm happy to withdraw this item and we'll start from the beginning. I've spent several hours in the past couple of weeks reading through the Dutch Dialogue report, you know, that very expensive report that we spent a lot of money on and we haven't implemented anything out of it yet. I spent a lot of time reading through it again, and I think I've come up with a very common sense recommendation through an ordinance that I've written myself that I was hoping that we could look at, but I'm happy to take that motion through Public Works. So if I can get a second, I'd like to withdraw this motion and let's just get it completely out of the realm of our agenda, and we'll start over.
I'll second.
All right. Just from a agenda point of view, Susan, can we take up this matter at this point, or do we need council's approval to amend the agenda, or just wait until we get to number 10 on second readings?
Mayor, I suggest we wait till we get to number 10, and then if Councilmember Griffin wants to make a motion to withdraw the matter from the agenda, we can do it at that point in time.
Is that acceptable to you, council member? We'll just get to it.
It works for me.
That's spot on.
And I will bring the updated document that I've been working on and ask that it be placed on the next Public Works agenda so we can start over. Since it's been 18 months since we took this up the first time. We've got a new council now. So I just don't think it's a good idea for staff to defer items for this long and not give us any sort of update on as to why it's been deferred. And to me, it just doesn't look good. So happy to start over.
I appreciate that. I think some rationale had been explained as to why that happened. Councilmember Brady.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councilmember Griffin brings up an interesting point about revisiting ordinances, especially ones that are related to development. And I know I've had conversations with several of my council colleagues about Charleston's need for a unified development ordinance, that it might be time that we take a fresh look at all of our ordinances that are related to development, especially ones that may not have been revisited in some cases 40 years. So I would just ask respectfully for the next council meeting, if under council communications, we could begin to have a discussion around a unified development ordinance and what that could look like in terms of a stakeholder task force, because obviously we would want input from the conservation community, the development community, and all the people that have a stake in development within the city.
Madam Clerk, you got that? So duly noted. I did read with interest that the town of Somerville threw their UDO out just the other day. So there must be pros and cons to it. All right, any further on this, and we'll move along to our committee reports. All right, first up is our Committee on Community Development, Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes, my report is going to be very short. The Committee of Community Development met on January 28th at 4 p.m. And we had 4 items listed, and all the items there was for information only. We had a lot of discussions dealing with the Cooper River Bridge redevelopment and the new TIP allocation, the 3-year analysis on the mixed-use workforce housing. And you see an update for housing for Fair Charleston. and the low-line housing site, which we just got through voting on a few minutes ago. So all these items was for information only at the community development. And some of those 3 items, I-1, 2, 3, will be coming back to the community development for further discussion and a further vote if we have to. And that's all. That's it.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for Councilmember Mitchell? Hearing none. Committee on Public Works, Councilmember Waring. Looked like he walked out of the room there for a minute. Without objection, we'll proceed to Committee on Traffic and Transportation, Councilmember Seekings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Committee on Traffic and Transportation met this afternoon at 2 o'clock. Everything that I'm going to report out to you is for information only. There is no need for any vote of this council, but we heard from our team internally about the status of the build grant for the Ashley River Bridge bike pedestrian lane. I think it's fair to say that they are working hard and moving very quickly forward on that project. It's complicated, but the good news for us is we have the right team in place to bring it all together. There will be some activity that you all should see in the next month or so in terms of milestones and benchmarks that need to be met in the development of that project, particularly as it relates to environmental studies. But we are on track and moving forward. Our team is in place. They're working with the various other agencies that have a grip on that, and more to come. If you need anything, Jason Kronsberg and his team have a presentation. They're working on a website that's not up and running yet, but when it is, we'll make sure that you get a link to it so you can share it with your constituents and they can see in real time what that project is all about and where it stands vis-a-vis design, construction, and ultimately completion. We also had a report from Ron Mitchum, Executive Director of the COG, also Executive Director of CARTA. He gave a fairly comprehensive view of what's going on at the COG and CARTA in terms of transit and transportation in the region. To say there's a lot going on would be an understatement, but just so you all know, CARTA is involved in many things. They're taking the lead on the Low Country Rapid Transit Project. We are looking at our routing. We've doubled the service out on James Island on the Route 31. We are doing COVID testing at Mary Street and in North Charleston. So there's a lot going on in transit and transportation. I'd like to thank this council and particularly those who serve on the CARTA board for being supportive of all the things that are going on in difficult times. CARTA and local transportation and public transportation has really done well, if not thrived, during this time. The last is we talked about the low battery seawall and parking policies going forward. More to come on that. It was mostly a conversation. I had some conversations with Mr. Benjamin afterwards, and I think we will reach resolution on how we're going to park along the low battery seawall to make sure there's equal and extended access for everybody in the community, and there aren't those who take advantage in terms of weeks and months of that access. So all coming along well. We also had an update from Mr. Benjamin about all the things he's doing, and they're plentiful, and I'm sure he'd be happy to discuss them with you individually at your leisure. So with that, I would ask adoption as a support, but there's nothing that needs to be acted on by this council this evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you, Council Member. Councilmember Shade.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councilmember Seekings, I don't know if I didn't hear you talk about with the build, but don't we have a time frame or time statute of limitations on it that we have to be worried about, or are we?
Well, the build grant and its requirements for spending the money on the project that it's dedicated to does come with certain benchmark requirements, and we are on track to meet them. I suspect there will be some slight movement, but not much. But our team recognizes that that money comes with some directives, and they are operating within the confines of those directives, including the time directives. And again, feel confident that as of right now, they have a good handle on that and good control of that. And this very important project is moving forward expeditiously and in accordance with the requirements of that grant.
Good job. Thank you.
Bottom line is we have a design firm helping us up to 30% design now, but by September, we need to have selected the final design build team, and we are on track to do that at this time. Great, thank you. All right, any other questions for Councilmember Seekings? Hearing none, our Committee on Ways and Means, Councilmember Gregory.
Move for approval as submitted, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
We have to go back to Councilman Waring's report.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Councilmember Waring, Committee on Public Works.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate y'all letting me duck up.
Did we vote?
You can read into that what you want, but anyway.
We didn't. I'll come back to Ways and Means if you don't mind, Councilmember Gregory.
Not a problem. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, good. The Committee on Public Works and Utilities did meet on yesterday. Got a wonderful presentation from our environmental services people. I'm gonna tell you, it's a real-time computer program that frankly is designed to pick up efficiencies. They're tweaking that and gonna come back in 2 weeks with a more refined version of it. But just stay tuned. That's it's going to increase efficiencies in our sanitation department to a high level. So I appreciate Mr. O'Brien and Mr. Alltop's work in it thus far. Stormwater management update. The first of the month is a little bit long, but Councilman Seekings, we're going to come next meeting with a presentation on what was done on Low Battery 1, Phase 1, and some information on Phase 2, because Councilman Seeking knows that Phase 1 has been a model to duplicate, and it's finished. It's very beautiful, but our committee saw a PowerPoint presentation by Mr. Fountain on that, of which he's going to refine and show to all of council in 2 weeks. We had a executive session for information, and that's all it was on the West Edge area. And now to Mr. Fountain with the stormwater update. And if you would accepting the low battery wall, Mr. Fountain, pick up from there, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Waring. So we did have one item that was voted on with the memorandum of agreement with CWS for the low battery Phase 2 project, which I believe passed unanimously at council and was on Ways and Means again this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Fountain. And let me move approval on that right now, and then you pick up with your report.
Second.
Councilmember Griffin.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Warren, we did not go into executive session in Public Works. That was real estate.
You're right about that.
Just let the record reflect, we did not.
Thank you. I'm reading my agenda. Maybe I'm still.
That's okay, buddy.
I think I'm still thinking about that. But anyway, go ahead.
We did get a report.
It was such a memorial event we had in real estate, Councilmember Waring, it kind of spilled over into public.
We did get a report on West Edge drainage.
West Edge got confused. And
that's right. I'm not thinking that parking garage. But anyway, go ahead.
All right, so let's vote on the one matter, number B, I think that requires us our approval, even though we approved it also at Ways and Means. Any further discussion on that?
Mr. Mayor, just very briefly, if I might.
Councilmember Seeking.
Just, I see the picture that's behind Mr. Fountain there, which is the low battery. I just think it's important, and we didn't mention it during Ways and Means, to note that Phase 2 is within budget, as was Phase 1. And that the Charleston water system, thank you very much, Councilmember Waring and Mayor Tecklenburg, who sits on that board, are picking up a good bit of the tab for that project, $1 million worth, which is not an insignificant amount. So as we move forward, we are on schedule, on budget, thanks to lots of hard work by many people, including Mr. Fountain and his team. And we had a lot of talk about this project before it started. I'm glad that the conversation has been mostly, if not all, positive since we've gone forward. So thank you all for your support of what is really a cool project. And if you haven't been down there, I saw today it's just really brooms and pickup down on Phase 1 now. It's essentially done. It's really worth seeing. It looks fantastic. So please go take a look. And if you can't make it, just go onto the website. You can see the live cam. Looks great. So
great.
Avail yourself of that. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I think Councilman Seekins may have stepped away, but we're going to do a PowerPoint presentation on the low battery wall at the next meeting, at the next council meeting.
Thank
you. We're going to let you be the MC of that.
Good. I'd love to do it.
All right, let me call the question. All in favor of that item, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. Fountain, and duly noted, Councilmember Waring, that I've also talked to Mr. Fountain today, and on your recommendation, future meetings, we'd like to highlight one or two projects and handle them a little more in-depthly, a little more detail, as opposed to when Mr. Fountain goes through the whole litany of projects. You do kind of get lost in so many projects going on at one time. I don't know how he keeps track of it. But going forward in the future, we'd like to focus on one or two and do a little more complete presentation at council.
You know, Mr. Mayor, one thing on that, it may be best to do it the second meeting of the month, because you know that tends to be a more abbreviated update versus the first meeting of the month. Maybe save the presentation for the second meeting of the month.
Yes, sir. Mr. Fountain, would you like to report on any more?
I certainly can go through the updates briefly if council's interested, or we can wait until next meeting to have the more detailed part of the low battery and Spring Fishburne. Either way is fine with me.
Well, let's do this, Mr. Fountain. Can you at least go through the downtown portion that we put on there for Councilman Sacklin and Councilman Gregory?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
That's pretty
That's a good idea.
So
you have that chart showing West Edge?
Yes, pull that up for you real quick. Sorry, you're throwing off my my order of presentation.
Oh, I didn't need to do that.
No, you're okay. You're okay. I can adapt. Okay, here we go. So this is the update we gave about the West Edge drainage, giving a little bit of explanation of what's happening sort of in the overall area surrounding the West Edge development and TIF district, Horizon TIF district, as we move forward over the next few years. So on the this is a graphic that's frequently been presented by the West Edge Foundation. It's a good kind of overview, simplified overview of the site. On the left, you can see the area of town we're talking about. The blue boundary that comes around the outside is the kind of the overall drainage basin that tries to basically flow down through sort of the drainage features of Gadsden Creek and out into the marsh. It's a very large area, about 200 acres, which obviously experiences some of the heaviest flooding in the city. The green and red arrows, the green shows stormwater and the red shows tidal water. The red's kind of buried beneath the stormwater in this image. And I think we're all familiar during high tide events, obviously the tide water come up kind of through that creek feature and basically flood out kind of the Gadsden Green, which is sort of this focal area here in the center, as well as surrounding streets. During heavy rainstorms, you kind of see the same thing, and then that water basically also drains out through that creek feature. So the methodology that's being worked to improve the drainage situation and tidal flooding situation in this area is shown on the right. This gets slightly more complicated, but I think it makes sense from the graphic. So basically what's being done is we're splitting this large drainage basin here on the left. And remember, a drainage basin is basically anywhere that water falls within this blue area, any rain that falls in there, it all flows to the same point down here into the harbor. So on the right, we're splitting up how the water that falls on the peninsula in this area drains out. So we're going to split out what's called the President Street Basin here, this 124 acre basin to the top, and that will tie into the Spring Fishburne project. So there's a President Street tunnel on Spring Fishburne, which we'll talk about a little bit more in 2 weeks, which basically runs, you can see the terminus of the tunnel at Harmon Field. That was the big construction project site at Harmon Field on President Street over the last number of years. That water would flow through that tunnel down to the primary portion of Spring Fishburne under kind of Septima Clark, and then out to the pump station that we're currently building the wet well for and outfall system for between the two bridges. So that water gets disconnected from kind of going through the Gadsden Green community, and instead comes down into the deep tunnel system. I'm going to jump here. The area that is sort of the core of the West Edge development and the shading here, that, as you've seen kind of the first phases go in out there, that whole area becomes relatively elevated. Relatively is probably an understatement for some of the areas. If you drive out there, you see that it's way up above existing ground. So what that lets them do is they keep building through through those projects is they basically cut off the tidal water coming in by elevating the drainage pipe so high that the tide no longer can come up the pipe system. That lets them also drain out all of the new properties they're building through that existing drainage system, which eventually gets piped in. The challenge with that, of course, is it cuts off the drainage from the gas and green area that can no longer flow through there because it's all been elevated. So this kind of center basin here, which we have labeled as the Fishburne Street 2 basin in somewhat confusing engineering parlance, that creates a new drainage system that flows kind of north along the major street here and turns at Stony Field and comes back through the drainage system through Stony Field. That was the permit that West Edge was coming through asking for basically city support on, the council supported to help basically drain out this whole area, and that'll be tide protected, so you won't see tidal inflow through that area. You'll only see stormwater outflow. And that should provide significant improvements in the central basin here, as you'll no longer see the tidal flooding, and you will see a method for stormwater to flow out because they're able to get more grade to basically lower that elevation and get the water out in this section. The somewhat challenging part there is it does trap this kind of small area here in the what we have labeled as the Spring Street Basin, and that the water can't, it's too low here for it to get out through Fishburne Street. And it's too low to come out through the West Edge complex, but it isn't connected directly into the President Street shaft. So part of what the West Edge group is doing is actually tying that basin into the Spring Fishburne deep tunnel system as well. So they're installing additional street infrastructure, basically pipes, to bring that water over to the deep tunnel system and help that drain out. So basically this section of work will go in as the tunnel completes into phase 4. The President Street section will go into the tunnel as it completes into phase 4. And then the two center sections here will be basically handled during the West Edge development as they build their drainage system for their next phasing on that. So any questions on that one? That one's relatively complicated, even though it looks like a somewhat simplistic graphic. If there aren't, I will stop sharing this screen and then jump back to my peninsula map, and then restart. Sorry, too many clicks.
It's all right. You got us waiting with great anticipation.
All right, let me see if this transfers over. Okay, did this transfer over to the peninsula map? Might take a second to load. It's a very large PDF file.
We have it. We have it.
Yes, we have it.
Thank you. So it's testing my my Zoom acrobatics when I'm jumping back and forth between different shared files. So this is kind of an overview of work that splits Councilman Gregory and Councilman Saccharin's districts in sort of heavy, I'd say heavy rehabilitation and maintenance work on the kind of northwestern portion of the peninsula. And this is just kind of a quick view of what we've done in the last 12 months roughly out here. And this area has a lot of older drainage system, a lot of vitrified clay pipe, a lot of tree root intrusion. So it's a really challenging system to maintain and keep clean. And it's very low lying, a lot of localized low areas. So you do see a lot of flooding. So we've been working through with the council members and with some of the residents, cleaning out some of these lower lying areas that will hold water for often a day or two after a major rainstorm over the last month or the last year. So run through the projects very quickly on these. The first thing we did out here was we worked through Rutledge, which is a DOT road, but it's one of the kind of core drainage systems for the area. And we basically started at Poplar Street and cleaned out the pipe system all the way down to Gordon Street. Those were basically sedimented almost completely solid, almost the entire length of the system. We were able to remove all of that sediment. That system does flow out both onto Gordon to some extent, but primarily it comes down to Grove Street and flows out Grove Street, where we had a couple of years ago basically reconstructed and cleaned and basically restored some box culverts at the end of Grove Street. So that has helped some with the drainage there. I think we still have more to do along that section of the system, likely in this connection from where we did clean to the extent of the previous cleaning, but it's provided some relief, even if not a complete resolution to flooding. We did then work down on President Street, just south of the park. Let's see. So on President Street, basically moving from Moultrie to Congress. This is a kind of another localized bowl that we were able to clean out this section of the drainage system and reactivate the basically outflow from Congress out to the marsh here. That does seem to have made some significant improvements on that low-lying area that was really holding a significant amount of water. We also worked further south in an area that most of you are probably really familiar with flooding, which is kind of the President and Bogard Street area, which is really at the very bottom of my map. Basically cleaned that section all the way down to Spring Street, down kind of through Septima Clark with as much traffic control as we could get. This area will not get resolved until the Spring Fishburne project comes online. I mean, that's why there is an entire tunnel that extends through this system with all of those drop shafts, is it's an incredibly localized bowl, but we wanted to provide as much flood relief as we could in the meantime until that project comes online. We then worked on Grove Street at Rutledge. So this is another area. The more you're familiar with this portion of town, the parking lots here have always held kind of significant quantities of water. You'll see standing water for days and days after storm events. Kind of gets to be almost a health hazard with the level of standing water. We did reconstruct and find some collapsed piping and other problems along this area. We're able to restore that and clean the other areas, and it does drain out relatively well now at this point. Let's see. We also worked further down on Gordon Street. Gordon Street's another area that experiences a lot of flooding, repaired collapsed section of pipe near the end of Gordon Street, near Wagner, and we're able to get that flow reconnected and working as well as some earlier work we had done on the north-south portion of Wagner Street. Let's see, moving north again, the Piedmont and Maple area, sort of another localized low point within the neighborhoods, holds water. So this one was interesting in that we started out at Piedmont and Maple and cleaned the obvious outfall, which is going up Maple Street, down Hester Street in the way of much of Charleston, over on Alberta, and then eventually down 10th, and then eventually out into the marsh. Cleaned that whole system, basically monitored it through a storm event, and really didn't see nearly the reduction in flooding we expected at Piedmont and Maple versus the amount of work we had done and cleaning we had done. We did see improvements on Hester and Alberta, but not much on Piedmont and Maple. Went back, kind of redid some inventory work in the area, and noticed there's some disconnect in the system that wasn't readily apparent. And portions of this intersection actually flow north along Piedmont, which we cleaned, and then cleaned all of Peachtree coming out of the marsh. And that did seem to provide some relief. This is, again, a very low lying intersection. It's about 6 feet in elevation, with the surrounding areas mostly being about 10 feet in elevation. So it is a challenging area to keep completely dry, but that did provide some relief, and we've seen improvement, at least in the storms so far this year. Though we haven't yet had one of the full-size rain bombs. The last area we went through in this section of the town was sort of the North Enston, Sans Souci area here. Again, very high. This was actually a very high area, a little bit unusual to see the amount of flooding we saw. So we cleaned Enston down Sans Souci all the way out to King Street. And again, that seems to have relieved some of the unusual flooding that we were seeing in that area. I think there was an actual blockage that we were able to get out, root intrusions and things, and get that restored. One update that I don't have on this map that we did talk about at the meeting also, and we've talked about a couple of previous meetings, was we've also worked our way through about 10,000 linear feet of pipe cleaning. So almost 2 miles of pipe cleaning in the what we call the Cooper Jackson area, which is really the north portion of the east side. Basically, as part of the work we're doing with AECOM to assess drainage in that basin. We kind of were able to combine some cleaning we needed to do for survey access, where normally we'd go in and clean manholes to let surveyors take shots to build our computer model. We decided that while we were in there doing that work, we would also clean all of the pipes because of the level of obstruction we saw, rather than just cleaning spot locations for survey work, but not improving the drainage in any way. And we took the opportunity to come in and do basically significant pipe cleaning as well. So we'd see short-term improvement to the drainage while we're waiting to work through the improvement projects in that area. So about 10,000 feet, again, of pipe cleaning, a little bit over $100,000 worth of drainage clean out work. And we should see some significant improvements, at least in water drain back out again after storm events as that finishes up. So those were the kind of this section. updates instead of the normal large capital projects.
Councilmember Gregory?
Oh.
He seemed to have frozen up on us.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. We lost you for a minute there, Councilmember.
Okay. At Gordon, Matt, you said
Yes.
you did some cleaning. Did it significantly reduce the flooding in that creek bed?
So the end that we did, there's a couple different areas of Gordon that we've worked on. So
You know the one I'm talking about that looks, I mean, it's.
Yeah, so the work that we did on Gordon and Wagner, kind of this area, this did result in some real improvements. We found like some completely collapsed pipes and blockages down here. But remember, a lot of this pipe is clay. And it tends to somewhat disintegrate over time or have tree roots that impact it or utility conflicts that will collapse it. That we did restore and rebuild, and this does seem to have improved. The other end of Gordon, which is probably where you're used to talking about more. This area we're continuing to work on, but it's challenging. I mean, that is a very low area. We're down in 4 and 5 feet of elevation. So I mean, you're at an elevation where when we get one of those extreme tides like we had in the fall, you almost have water in the street just from tidal impact. So that one we have cleaned it. We've cleaned it a number of times. It's better, but it is not perfect. That'll take more work to figure out an approach to try to limit that impact.
And what about Moultrie and President?
Yeah, so the President Moultrie, that's a significant improvement. We did find some serious blockages. It's another DOT street in this situation. We've been trying to work more collaboratively with them as well. This area we did clean out, basically starting at Moultrie, working our way down President all the way to Congress. Found a number of blockages in that area as well. DOT was going to come back and clean the inlet structures, the roadside grate inlets after we cleaned the primary pipe. That does seem to have shown some significant improvements in that area as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Yes, Mr. Pumpkin, I'm happy to see that you all went. I saw Sanders Brothers over on Lee Street and Hanover Street and Nassau Street, and he was doing some work over there, cleaning the drains and stuff up there. But I want to ask a quick question. Did they went over by Line and Hanover? I mean Nassau and Line Street and Aiken Street. Do you know if they went that far over?
They have, yeah. I've got a figure of that. I can send you. Might be better to try to send it to you than have you watch me try to
that's all right.
dig through my files. But I've got a map showing all the streets that they cleaned, and we did get basically, and it's somewhat of an overestimation because there's so many pipes and streets in that area. But we did basically start at the Cooper Street area, the kind of just south of where the James Lewis Jr. would be going. And sorry, I'm just dragging my own screen here. If you can see me drawing on my computer. So we did basically start at Cooper, and pretty much everything from Cooper north up to about Johnson or Stewart, we did work through and clean, including the north-south running streets with Nassau and Hanover and America. So that section is significantly clean. We haven't yet finalized cleaning the very outfall section, which sounds backwards. It's normally the opposite of the way we do things, where we try to clean from the outfall, working our way up. In this situation, we had to clean from the upper end of the basin, working your way down, because you don't want to basically blow the dirt into what you've just cleaned. So you keep kind of working your way through with the existing blockage and plug in place, and you'll go back and clean that at the end, which is the part that Sanders is working on now. So it's just about complete and should result in some significant improvements. Again, I don't expect that to resolve the flooding issues, but it should help it drain faster once there's a low tide event.
Yeah, I can see on the corner of Line and Aiken is the church there, and that's when it floods real bad. They can't even get into that particular building, and it's coming from Columbus Street all the way down, and that's Aiken and Line Street there, and Hanover Street and a little bit of Columbus. But I saw them working over on Cooper Street, Nassau Street, and they did a good job around there, all by the public housing. They were all over there cleaning the drains out. So I didn't know if they went back in that other area or not, because I didn't notice,
They haven't gone quite that far south yet to get down to Line. They
okay.
they mostly focused on kind of the northern section of the basin, which is where the most significant, like consistent blockages were found when we did our original assessment. Because we went through and popped all the manholes in the basin and tried to verify where the blockages were. There likely will be some additional work down there, but it wasn't the kind of the initial surge. I mean, it's taken us about 4 months with the contractors to get through this amount of cleaning, but we will continue working through that basin as part of that overall project.
All right, thank you.
Great. Councilmember Sacron.
Yeah. Matt, I just want to say thanks for your continued efforts with folks downtown. I know you're on an email thread with us, and I just want to say thanks. I appreciate you being so responsive to the constituents. And I will say, I've heard from several over the past month or two about the improvements. Obviously, there's areas that still need improving, but it's tangible. I mean, they see some of the improvements, so thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, the crews are working really hard. I mean, we're down. We're running around 40 people plus our contracted forces, but we're doing a lot of work through the city, and we appreciate everybody's patience trying to kind of let us work through the problems and see what works and what doesn't work, and then get back out there and try to do another round of corrections once we see the storm event results.
Great. Councilmember Waring.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Matt. This is the best comprehensive report on maintenance and cleaning out pipes on the peninsula that I've seen since I've been on council. I'm in my 10th year, so Matt, you and the team, I don't have the words to describe the thanks for that, because whether you live on the peninsula or not, that presentation shows you with the results of our increase in the stormwater fee, the results of you coming up, frankly, you and your team coming up with smaller projects and having money set aside for it. I mean, 2 miles worth of pipes being cleaned on the peninsula is phenomenal. I mean, that's phenomenal. And that fact just kind of like, you just kind of shot that over our head. But just getting pipes working like they're supposed to work is just so appreciative. And that's why I say we need to get back to, I don't know whether we get sandwich boards, Mr. Mayor, or some sort of demarcation that we put out when our drainage team is out there working for you, that people will know that. I saw Matt hand go up.
Councilman Warren, I was going to say, you made that recommendation before. We did take it seriously. We did actually go through, produce sandwich boards, kind of more the election style signage, and we actually just got them delivered to our office yesterday. So they'll be going out with the field crews starting probably next week.
I mean, that's awesome. I think not only our crews, but when Sanders Brothers and their team are out there, let advertise that as well. So thank you so much for what you do.
Great. I see Councilmember Gregory's hand one more time.
Yeah, I just want to, Matt, I'm going to just tell you, I've been on council for a long time. And this is the first time that I'm echoing with what Councilman Waring is saying. I've never seen anything like this.
That's right.
Never. Okay. So I just want to thank you because, and I've never seen this much attention being paid to the peninsula on this end. Yeah, we've had some pump stations here, there, but the comprehensive nature of what you're doing, I've never seen this before. And I just want to tell you, thank you. I really appreciate you. Thanks.
Yep. It's all adding up over time. Councilmember Appel and then Shade.
All right, let's let the love fest continue here. So yesterday on Facebook, they have this feature where, Facebook shows you a photo you posted a year ago and reminds you and wants you to share it again. Well, it's a photo of me, Matt, Benji, Senator Sen, and a couple folks from OCRM standing in the marsh. In an outfall behind South Windermere Shopping Center. And we were, I believe, talking at that time about some of the general permitting work that we're working on with OCRM to help expedite and fast track some of this outfall cleaning, which is extremely beneficial and well underway. And a constituent, I won't reveal her name, made a comment under the post that I put out on my Facebook page. And she says, "My house flooded regularly after the Great Flood of 2015, It had never flooded before, and it is not in a flood zone, yet it flooded multiple times a year. Ever since the outfall was cleaned, it hasn't flooded a single time. Thanks for continuing to monitor this situation. It has made a huge difference in quality of life for my family. I mean, that's serious stuff right there. You know, we can't solve all the world's problems. We can't fix the United States healthcare system and the vaccination rollout. We can't solve, you know, some of the negative stuff in our country's history that perpetuates to this day. We can make advances and improvements. But man, at the end of the day, when you can make that kind of tangible, positive impact on people's lives, that's some real stuff. And this would not have been happening if we didn't have a stormwater department that was dedicated to this every single day, and a stormwater director that was so passionate about what he does and is so effective about getting the job done. So just wanted to share that story with everyone as we were going around singing Matt's well-deserved praises.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Shade.
I just wanted to echo a few comments that y'all have heard. And if you join in on our Public Works Committee meetings, they are full of what you just heard tonight from Matt. And what you didn't hear from him tonight was the rest of the city and all the other projects that he's working on, that the department is working on throughout West Ashley and James Island and other areas. So this is just a snippet of what's going on the peninsula. And I was very impressed with the detail he showed us yesterday, and again, showed the full council. So Matt, just thank you, and we'll get more detailed reports as we go along.
Thank you.
I
Councilmember
promise,
Warren, you got anything to report?
yeah, I promise this is the last thing, Mr. Mayor. And I'm taking liberty as chair of the Public Works. I got a Facebook post from a Mr. John Champagne. He took pictures along the bikeway as it approached what we call the duck pond, you know, in the Ardmore area. I know you and I have talked about it, Mr. Mayor, about trying to make that area a little bit more, to beautify that area. But there are no trash cans up and down the greenway. So people ride their bike, walks, whatever, and they just throw the trash. I'm wondering if we can put some trash cans there, and Mr. Fountain, if we can put on the Public Works agenda and maybe even recreation to come up with a plan to make those duck ponds. They have a duck pond up in North Charleston off of Montague, I believe, off of the circle. It looks nothing like the duck pond over in
Very nice.
Ardmore. Very nice area. And I think our people, our recreation people, and maybe some of our Public Works people, combination of two, can make that area safer, beautify it, and obviously put a system in it and make it clean. And I'm gonna tell you, this Mr. Champagne was very positive. He was not negative, and bringing forth and he's willing to go to work. So I'm gonna reach out to him and get some of his positive thoughts, maybe working with the West Ashley revitalization team. But
Great.
Again, thank you for what you do.
Terrific.
That's the extent of my report, Mr. Mayor.
That's the end of your report. We
Finally,
did
that's right.
tonight, so we've saved the more detail for the next meeting. So, y'all, like was mentioned, you should have been there for the committee meeting. You'd hear it all.
Oh,
All
yeah.
right, next back to our Committee on Ways and
Move
Means.
for approval.
Motion to approve. Any comments, questions? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, the ayes have it. Now we've got bills up for second reading. I think we got 1 through 8 on there.
Move for approval.
Second.
Action, any discussion on any of those items, 1 through 8? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Now for third reading and
So
ratification.
moved.
Second.
Items 1 through 8. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Now we would, number 9 is deferred, and we now come to number 10. Councilmember Griffin.
I'll make a motion that we withdraw this item off the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, it's actually the item Councilmember Griffin was referencing is item number 16.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But item number 10, I did want to note just for the record, item number 10 is being withdrawn at the request of the applicant.
Okay. We
And
need a motion to withdraw number 10.
We don't. I just noted that on there. The applicant does not want to proceed forward with it. As well as number 14, the applicant has requested withdrawal of that ordinance as well. And I also just wanted to note for council that the one ordinance that is set to expire is item 15, and that is set to expire March the 24th of this year.
Terrific. All right, so number 10 and 14 will come off, duly noted, and you can take care of that. So I apologize, Councilmember Griffin, it's item number 16. Now I call on you again.
I'll make a motion that we withdraw this item.
Number 16. Do we have a second?
I'll
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, we had a motion. I'm sorry, we had a motion from earlier in the meeting already from Councilmember Griffin and Councilmember Shade.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, you're counting that motion even though it was made back then. That's fine. Okay. Any discussion to withdraw number 16? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. So next up for bills for first reading, we have an ordinance to create a board and commission called the City of Charleston Storm Surge Protection Feasibility Advisory Committee. I think you've read about it, but it's basically to provide citizen information engagement regarding our Corps of Engineers 3x3 study. Do I
Move for approval, Mr. Mayor.
got a motion to approve? Got a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor? Oh, Councilmember Gregory, then.
I just had a question. In looking at the composition of the task force, I do see where there is an at-large person. But what really stuck out with me, and I know this is for the peninsula, and that we're dealing with the Army Corps of Engineers recommendation. But what stuck out to me is that there is no west of the Ashley representative there. I know it's peninsula, but as we move forward with this issue, especially where that water is going to go, it would be great for someone from the West Ashley. And when I say West Ashley, I'm including James Island, Johns Island, and there. But I just think that there needs to be somebody there. And then in addition, Mayor, and I know we haven't as a council really deal with the issue yet in terms of equity. I just think somehow that has to be intertwined in here, especially when we deal with the environmental issues. We are going to do an environmental assessment, that somehow we fold in looking at everything we do, Mayor, through an equity lens. And it would be great, again, for us to at least have some sense of equitably, how will this affect different areas of the city, particularly those areas that are lower income or minority. And I just think that somehow we need to start pushing that into the discussion, knowing that when we're dealing with federal agencies, there are always non-discrimination provisions, Title VI, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of times that gets lost in the mix. And so somehow I want to try to get us to start, you charge me with this, and you're going to get sick of it after a while, but we need to start looking at things through an equity lens. And that's everything we do. Okay? I don't know how you do that, Mayor, but I'm just saying, I just think that somehow we need to bring that into the discussion.
So thank you. And I certainly will keep that in mind when I make recommendations to you the next meeting as to actual membership. I had intended to include a council member from West Ashley, and honestly, that was the intent of number 9 on the committee, a member from the social justice community. So we were certainly trying to be inclusive.
Okay, thank you.
Del Chapo, I think I had seen next, Jackson, and then Griffin. Del Chapo?
So 2 points. I think well, they're going to kind of contradict each other. Just as though you're considering what happens in West Ashley, James Island, Johns Island, there's also that concern what happens on the eastern side as well, and what happens on the Cooper River side. So if we're going to talk one, I think we need to talk the other as well. I think 17 members is a lot. That's a lot of conversations happening, and I think that just bogs things down. I'm always a big fan of less than 10, maybe 12 at the most. And I don't like putting on their plate also to secure funds and to seek out fundraising opportunities. I think if this is to get the community engaged, that's what we want, is unfiltered community engagement, not, maybe alliances or things like that, and something else for them to have in the back of their mind as like an ultimatum, it kind of feels like.
Mm-hmm. Well,
other than that, I'm supportive of it. Those are just my 2 concerns.
Well, thank you. I hear that. I do think the reference to funding is a concern that our community has shared over the last few years of how we're going to pay for all this infrastructure improvements, and it needs to be a team sport for it to work out. I mean, I don't view this group to be primarily involved in fundraising or anything of that nature, but certainly want to keep in mind the thought processes and ideas of how we're going to pay for all these expensive projects going forward. Councilmember Jackson and then Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also have my reservations about the assisting with the solicitation of private funds. I mean, maybe that would be appropriate once the committee has, sort of gelled and really done the major part of their work, which is to help us make sure that we're, designing and desiring a seawall that works for the citizens and the community. So I would leave that open. I mean, I'm happy to vote first reading with that language in there, but I do think that we should be, really drilling down onto how much of a credential you would have in terms of an eligible member that you would like to appoint. And I also think that I feel very strongly that you need to have someone from west of the Ashley. I think I feel equally strongly that when you think about where the seawall and the impact and what we've been talking about, I know there's no barrier reef being proposed right now, but in terms of the impact of tidal surge, I think this might be one time when James Island is out there as the most vulnerable coastline, if that's going to be the consideration of the committee. So I would strongly urge you to think about the geography of the west of the Ashley communities. I'm sure that the bigness of the membership can be managed by having working groups and task force, assignments and things. We've managed to do that very successfully with the James Island Creek Water Quality Task Force. We added a lot of members that I think are now strategic, and it's a big number, but we've divided into very strategically placed working groups, and I think that's a great system. So I'm not too worried about 17 members at this point.
Thank you. Councilmember Griffin.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to do this before we vote that, I'm inclined to vote no on this. And my reason why is because I don't want to give the public the perception that I support this idea of a seawall. I don't. And I know that this commission or committee is going to spend a lot of time on that issue. And I think it's a waste of resources. And I think we should be investing those resources looking at other projects. And so for those reasons, I'm inclined to vote no on this. I don't want to give anybody the perception that I'm supportive of the seawall project, because I'm not.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Any other, Councilmember Seekings and then Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I make my comments, I just want to say I totally agree with having citizen input and communication about what is sure to be, if it goes forward today, tomorrow, or somewhere down the road, the largest public works project we've ever had in the history of Charleston. And it's an important project, and it's also an important issue. A few things I'd like to point out and comment on, some of which have already been made. On our agenda, the title of this commission is the City of Charleston Storm Surge Protection and Feasibility Advisory Committee. But actually the ordinance that we've been given is for the City of Charleston Peninsula Coastal Flood Risk Management Study Citizen and Business Advisory Committee. So I think we need to all be on the same page as to exactly what we're talking about. The actual ordinance is much broader than what is published in our agenda, that it's going to look at both the storm surge, the Army 3x3 study, and other issues that are out there. And in fact, it specifically references in the ordinance that it'll be looking at storm surge protection and flooding from all causes. What is most immediate clearly is the Army Corps 3x3 project, which we as a council are going to have to take up in terms of our support and funding in this year, this calendar year. I 100% agree with the comments made by Councilmember Del Chapo and others that this commission is too big. It needs to be much more focused and smaller and manageable. It needs to be nimble. I really believe that, Mr. Mayor, if we give this first reading, I suspect we will, that it would be a good idea to go back and revisit and find a number somewhere around 9 of people who are committed to getting really involved in this quickly, that have the time and expertise to do it, and then can report back to the community independently about what's happening with the Army Corps of Engineers study and other projects that we need to pursue both on and off the peninsula. If this is going to be a group that's going to look broadly at the issue of flooding, clearly there's an entire city's worth of things to look at. So I would encourage us collectively, and Mr. Mayor, for you to look at the makeup of this commission and pare it down a little bit, make it more nimble, and let's all make sure we know what we're voting on and what the objective of this commission is. Because as drafted, it's not as published in our agenda. So with that, I'm happy to give it first reading, but I think we need to think about it before we actually put it on the books.
All right, Councilmember Shade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I really appreciate the initiative on creating this commission. I think it's overdue, and we need to be pushing forward with it. But being on the chair of the West Asheville Revitalization Commission, I have to join my other council members on questioning the size, and would urge reducing it somewhat. Anywhere between 9 and 11 commission members, I think, would make it more nimble and more focused. Let's go ahead and give it first reading tonight, and just maybe contemplate, if you wouldn't mind, thinking about reducing the size of it, just so you get more of a surgical focus on what we're trying to accomplish here.
So one of the main purposes, I'm sorry, Councilmember Mitchell.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I understand what all my colleagues are saying, and this is going to be a big impact, very impact, if it ever happens. And I don't know if it would ever happen to most of the area that I represent right now, with the wall coming all the way from the east side, going all the way up to probably almost close to Bridgeview, if you may. So, you know, even when you're picking out these people that's going to be on the committee, you need to look at those areas very carefully to find people who would be individuals that's going to really be able to give good input to what you're looking for. I mean, just not putting people on the committee, even from the east side, if you may, that don't have interests that much in pursuing this kind of what we're looking for. Because you're going to have people on the committee that you put on there and they're not really interested in what we're going through. They're just wasting time, to me. And that's just my opinion on it. But you need to have some people, a cross-reference of people from that particular area, which is the east side, from downtown, from West Ashley, with James Island, whatever the case may be. But you need to get key people, I believe, that's really interested in knowing what they're getting into and knowing what they're looking for, and not people that are spinning the wheels, because we don't need that, because we don't had too many people spinning the wheels on a lot of different commissions and committees that we sat on before. So this is, if you're thinking very seriously about this, because there's going to be a lot of money they're talking about, and we need to get this going as soon as possible. And I don't care how many people you're going to have on it, but need to have key people from the community who is ready and willing to sit down and give good input of what we are looking for, you know, because I think it's going to be a long drawn out thing. And I don't think none of us on council will be around anyway, even if this takes place. That's just my opinion on it. I don't think, I know I'm not going to be around anyway. So, but just to have the good input there for people to have a guide to go by, and something that we have look at very seriously.
Right. Well, I appreciate everyone's input, and we'll give serious thought. I do want to share that there are a number of folks that have already reached out who are very interested in being engaged and being a part of this. You know, I do want to make clear, Councilmember Seekings, that this, I mean, but for the Army Corps of Engineers 3x3 study, we would not be coming forward with this group. That's clear. So I know it's basically limited to the peninsula. We have other groups that study other areas. We got a Church Creek area now, committee authority going, but this committee is intended to be engaged and follow the recommendations of the Army Corps 3x3. And we have, as a council, you know, a workshop planned for, I think it's later this month, to really dig into detail of where we stand on it right now. And I hear you about the number. It could be unwieldy. I appreciate that. For some reason, I think it's been a little easier to manage the larger groups with the Zoom meetings sometimes. And Councilmember Jackson makes a good point about our James Island Water Quality Task Force. We must have 30 people on there, and we divided up into 3 groups that focus on different areas, and it really has worked quite well. So I think Mark could do a good job managing it. You want to be inclusive, Councilmember Gregory and Mitchell, and have people from various parts of the peninsula and the community, and the aquarium really wanted to participate. So I added them in there. So I'll certainly reflect on it and see what names I come up with before I come back to you. We don't have to fill them all right away, that's for sure, if we don't have people that aren't committed to really following this and being engaged in it. Councilmember Seekins, I'll come back to you.
Just very briefly, thank you for your comments, Mr. Mayor. What I might suggest is just to clean up, if in fact this really is a focus, especially in the short term, on the 3x3 study, I think the ordinance should really reflect that. And it is much broader than that. As currently drafted, it talks about storm surge protection and flooding from all causes. If we're looking at this issue, the 3x3 study, let's just put it out there that that's what we're doing. I think that would be actually helpful for the focus of this commission. It certainly would have to take into account the effects in places and other than the peninsula, but let's get them focused from the get-go so the mission is clear.
Well, we'll try to make it clear. Janie Warden helped write it up, and Mark. I mean, it does say the Army Corps of Engineers Peninsula Coastal Flood Risk Management Study. That's the 3x3 study. It refers to the National Economic Development Study, which is a part of that 3x3. The PED, the Preliminary Engineering Design, is also specifically part of the Corps 3x3 plan as it's been outlined to us. So it seems to me there's a lot of specifics here regarding that Corps 3x3, but we can drill down on it further. That's for sure. Councilmember Jackson.
I just have 2 quick things. I would agree that maybe just the name itself is unwieldy, and you know, and if it's only going to focus on the peninsula, which I agree is the right focus, with the ramifications that the Army Corps' game plan has for the coast. But you know, if, as you famously said over the years, Mayor, if it, you know, walks like a duck, then we should call it a duck. So I think you can work on the name. I was responding to resonating with Councilmember Gregory's you know, request that we make sure that we have a representative from what I would call the environmental justice community. And then I noticed that there's a term in there, the social justice community. So is that the same thing? Can we just call it the environmental justice community and make sure we've got a representative from the African-American neighborhoods, who, you know, whether they're included in the inside the wall or outside the wall, we want to make sure that we're, you know, taking care of any concerns that in the future that those neighborhoods will have. So I don't know what social justice community is. Maybe there's an art term for that it's something different.
Great. Well, I think we intended one and the same. And Janie, I see writing notes. We'll make some edits to this when we come back to you for second and third reading. Councilmember Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Listen, I agree with Councilwoman Del Chapo, Seekings on the size of this committee. I think it needs to be scaled, and I do agree. We need to keep it within the core study. We probably have the best climate or the best communication on council now when it comes to addressing flooding problems from one end of the city to the other. And I do not want to interrupt that or affect that in a negative way. We just got through looking at a comprehensive maintenance program in part on the peninsula, and you had people from West Ashley applauding that. A year and a half or so ago, we voted because of an overrun on the September Clark spring fish bearing project. We committed stormwater dollars for 5 years, I think it was, before we got that money from the state, which meant there were not going to be virtually any major projects west of the peninsula, West Ashley, James Island, and Johns Island. Thank God, you know, we all put together, and the governor and the people in Columbia saw fit to do that grant. Now these projects are back on again in large part. It's been since 1984 since the people of West Ashley, James Island, and Johns Island has been looking for flooding solutions in their areas of the city. And that constitutes, no doubt, the largest populated areas and citizenry in this town. The last thing I want to go to is back to a parochial fight. Prior to where we are now, if you looked at the spending for flooding fixes, it was heavily skewed on the peninsula for obvious reasons, but it occurred to the peril of West Ashley, James Island, and Johns Island. I mean, virtually, you go back and look at the dollars that were spent. It was horrendous. It was almost like hospitality and sales tax dollars always were spent on the peninsula. And the thought was no tourists come West Ashley, James Island, and Johns Island. Well, that's not the case anymore. And those dollars are not, I still would say not fairly spent, but we are beginning to get some dollars. West Ashley, James Island. West Ashley, James Island, maybe not so much Johns Island, Councilman Brady, but we got to come up with a better plan on that. But the fixes, West Ashley, James Island, and Johns Island, from a cost standpoint, we can take one major project on the peninsula and we can take those dollars and fix everything West Ashley, James Island, and Johns Island. So the last thing I want to do is get into a tiff, if you will, with a committee that's empowered for the peninsula that's injecting politics among the 13 people right now that I think have great synergy in addressing problems citywide. So I don't want to have a conversation after the meeting around the water cooler about stuff like this. Anytime you get an area that includes over 70,000 people in this city, that gets together and vote to say Spring Fishburne, September clock needs to be fixed. And we have to go back and tell our citizens, you guys got to wait until 2024 or whatever, whenever it was. It hurts to do that. It feels like you're failing your people to do that. So we are now have been given a second chance. So I think this piece about, I know we kind of dancing around it, but the piece about building the wall, I think we need to have an up or down vote on that on council. I've seen accounts in the newspaper where our match is going to be in excess of $600 million. I dare say, if our lives depended on it right now, all 13 of our lives, where are we going to get that money from? Or we would have to die. You have to kill all 13 of them. We don't know where that money's coming. So we're beginning to put a lot of staff time, now volunteer time into this. And I think it's only fair we begin to figure out where that money's coming from and to what sacrifice projects are going to be put in abeyance. We've got them there from 1984 coming forward. That's been on the books since 1984. And through this mayor and this council, we now addressing some of those ones. One of the ones, council members in your district, King Hugie Street. We now working on that. It's only been 30 years in coming. 30 years to spend $6 million on a certain part of the peninsula. Politics kept that from happening. The politics wasn't there. They get 7 votes to fix a project like that. So I throw a word of caution out there. We do not want to create a political lobbying group, if you will, that will cast a negative synergy in what's being accomplished citywide right now. So, I have some intimidation about that. I'm fine with the group going forward, but that group needs to be brought up to speed, not only on the peninsula, but projects that are now being addressed citywide and the complications with stopping or future projects that's being nationwide. When we refinanced a bond the other day, we saved $5 million in interest. And you know what we did? Went over there on Central Park Road, and at least are beginning to accumulate funding to fix a problem again that we've known about for decades. All through and you know what? It was a unanimous vote. Almost that came from the floor. I mean, that's great synergies of approaching our problems. The battery, low, high wall, phase 1, phase 2, unanimous votes all the way. And we're all proud of what we're doing. So I don't want to upset that apple cart. And I just throw the word of caution on that one, Mr. Mayor. So I think narrowing the scope will do that, given the feel that a broad spectrum. I think last thing I want to do is get in a tug of war and we get in a circle and start shooting at one another. That'll be a feeling for the whole city if we were to create that.
Right. Well, Councilmember Waring, I appreciate those words of wisdom and caution. And once again, I just say we wouldn't even be forming this if not in the need for engagement and input to the core 3x3 study, which they picked the area, to conduct this surge protection study. And in addition to that, we hope that they will also be taking a look at the drainage aspects within the area, which complements the whole study. So I do hear you loud and clear. There's no intent whatsoever here to exacerbate or create any kind of rivalries amongst us or sections of the city. There was reasons why the Corps did this, and I think we may end up at the end of the day not agreeing to move forward with a plan with them. That'll be up to council. But I feel it's our responsibility to give it the best shot at analysis and determination whether this is good for our city long term or not, and let the chips fall where they will once we do that. And part of this has been the desire of our citizens to have more input and engagement on this process. And that's what this is all about. So I've been listening. I'll make some modifications when I come back to you at the next meeting. But I appreciate getting first reading on this, and it won't be long. It'll help. I think us all focus on it when we have the workshop meeting on this topic. When is that going to be, Madam Clerk? I think it just
Next Thursday.
Oh, it's next Thursday.
February
So that'll be very timely. We'll have that workshop meeting before we come back and have second and third reading and recommendations on this committee. And I think that'll help everyone's overall perspective on it. All right, any further comments? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. The ayes have it. All right, any further business to come before us tonight?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Councilman Warren.
I do have two things on the, so if we're down to miscellaneous business on the agenda, that's where we are?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so I do have two things I want to add on the next agenda.
Yes, sir.
One stems from the community development meeting where, staff came up with the spending program, albeit for information, but I'd like to put on council to vote. When it comes to TIF dollars, I think the priority should be flooding, affordable housing, and then the low line or whatever else comes in. As you know, we were presented some information that from a spending standpoint, put a high priority in placing the low line first. Now, I'm a supporter of the low line, but I gotta be frank. I'm not gonna support leapfrogging the low line in front of flooding and obviously affordable housing, especially since the state altered the law to allow land purchases with TIF dollars last year. The graph that we were given, the grid that we were given showed about $16,600,000 in the next 1 to 3 years to be spent on the low line. And when it came to drainage in the area, it could be ongoing over the next 10 years. Affordable housing was to be 5 to 8 years. And the total was 5 million, drainage was 15 million, low line being 16.6. I actually want to put on the agenda, council to vote of priority spending on these TIF dollars. Because when monies that come out of the TIF area can go to drainage, that allows dollars to go out of the stormwater fund across the city that aren't eligible for TIF dollars. One of the items that came up in that discussion was the Cooper-Jackson drainage basin. And to my knowledge, we hadn't set aside $5 for that. I may be facetious, but we hadn't set aside any serious money for Cooper-Jackson drainage basin. It was estimated that that's going to cost $20 or $25 million. Part of the subject was shovel-ready projects versus projects that aren't shovel-ready. But the reason we are fixing the low battery wall today is because we have been putting money aside for it. This is my 10th year on council, and every year I've been on council, I voted for monies for the battery wall. There has not been a year that I have not, and those votes have been unanimous, by the way. So now we
Councilman Robbie, happy to put it on the agenda. It's not on the agenda tonight.
Okay, that's good. That's fine. So if we can get that on,
But I would respectfully say that as Councilmember Mitchell mentioned when he gave his report, he did expect those three matters to come back to Community Development Committee first before coming to council, and just respecting that protocol. If that's all right with you, it would come back to the next Community Development Committee and then get reported back to council.
Well, my point is the spending priority.
Yes, sir.
A lot of TIF funding. I think we should have an up or down vote, and maybe these instructions should go to community development. So when staff comes back with a spending priority that's not aligned with drainage, affordable housing, and down the line after that, that message needs to go out, not only to the community development, that message needs to go out to our staff. Because our staff needs to know what is the spending priority on these dollars. One of the problems with TIF in the past has been previous administrations, albeit stormwater rise wasn't what it is today, we did the above the surface pretty things with those dollars. Now we need to do the things below the surface with. So I just want to put that on the agenda. That information certainly can be on the agenda when community development comes back. But for staff to flip the script and come up with a spending priority that's less than certainly what our citizens are asking us for, I think we need to have an up or down vote. If the majority of the council wants to spend in a different direction, then that's democracy. But
Understood.
So anyway, that's all I like to put on the agenda.
All right, we'll be happy to do that. But
Okay,
you said there were 2 items.
That's
That
right.
was
The second item is, I really do believe I want to take our legal staff out of advice. You, with all due respect, have recused yourself from the Charleston School of Law issue. Our legal staff works at your pleasure. With you having a conflict, they're in a very gray area right now. I saw that in some of us who were in council when we had the internal audit with Mr. Majerny. He was worked for the city and he was trying to do his best job at an unbiased report.
Can I address?
Let me finish my thought. I'd like, all due respect, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to put a motion on the floor at our next meeting, the council to consider hiring legal counsel to advise city council on the Charleston School of Law issue.
Well, that really won't be necessary because I was trying to interrupt you to say that's exactly what we're doing. So
no, let me go further. The last time we did that, legal staff hired, without counsel's input, an attorney out of Columbia. What attorneys are to be hired should be approved by city council, not by our legal department. Now, in my opinion, that was a mistake the last time. We had no input on that. We had no input on the cost. We were told who the attorney would be, and we were told what that cost would be. And certainly we bore the brunt of it. We should bear the brunt of it up front. And the attorneys, all attorneys that are to advise council on this issue, that should be decided by a vote of council and not our legal department. I want to take them, it's just unfair to have our legal department.
Well, Councilmember, upon your request, which can be made at any time, we will put it on the agenda for you at the next meeting. Councilmember Jackson?
I was just going to say that since I am Mayor Pro Tem and acting as mayor in this issue, that I have been consulting with our legal team about the outside hiring. So I would be happy to have the council be educated and brought up to date about that whole situation.
Now, this is different what I'm asking, Mr. Mayor. I'm asking that a motion be put on the floor at the next meeting for city council to have a vote to hire legal counsel to advise it on its rights, legalities, or whatever of this, in particular, the agreement with the Charleston School.
If that's a motion, I second it.
Well, no, I'm putting it on the agenda for a motion.
I'm sorry, it's not on the agenda.
It's an agenda item for next meeting.
For it to be placed on the agenda.
That's
okay.
Which is fine.
Thank you. Thank you.
I see Ms. Herdina face lit up here. Would you like to address us?
Only to mention that council did direct us to take certain action after the last executive session. We have done that. And I was planning on having an executive session at the next real estate committee meeting to advise council, the real estate committee, and then council on where we are on this matter. And I mean, certainly, Councilmember Waring, you can, move forward with your motion, but I just wanted to let you know that we have taken a number of steps and are prepared to discuss the matter in executive session at the next council meeting.
Terrific. Councilmember Seekings.
Just very briefly, Ms. Erdina, if we're going to do that, I mean, it's great that it comes through the committee, but this is obviously going to be something that's for full council. Do you really need to have an executive session at real estate and then at council? We should just all hear this at one time together. I think this is the one time Councilmember Gregory, that I would say we probably ought to just bypass real estate and just come straight to city council and let's take it up together.
I have no objection to that. I was just offering that as a, out of respect to the committee.
Sorry, Councilmember Shade.
All right, we'll have it on the agenda. Any further business to come before us this evening?
No.
Hearing none, we stand adjourned.